In November 1987, inside the crawlspace of a Nashville, Tennessee home, something horrifying was uncovered. Skeletal remains buried beneath the dirt floor. Despite the admission of the perpetrator, the victims remained nameless for decades. On Tuesday, November 17, 1987, a tenant renting a home at 3509 Charlotte Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee, made a chilling discovery. While inspecting the dirt floor beneath the crawl space, he stumbled upon human remains buried beneath the surface. Shocked and alarmed, the tenant immediately contacted the police. The officers responded without delay and began excavating the area. What they unearthed were not just bones, but the skeletal remains of two women. A police detective stated at the scene, "I am very confident now that we have two victims. We have two skeletal remains, and there is no other bodies or body parts or evidence we need to seek out." Shortly after the gruesome discovery, the investigators shifted their focus to a man named James Schaefer, a former tenant of the same residence. At the time, Schaefer was already incarcerated in Kentucky, serving a sentence for the kidnapping and assault of a 14-year-old boy. During the investigation, he confessed to ending the lives of the two women. According to his statement, he had taken the lives of the two women in 1985, claiming he acted in a moment of rage. He alleged that the women were prostitutes known to him only as Sheila and Little Bit, and that the fatal encounter occurred when he caught them attempting to steal from him. Despite Schaefer's confession, the authorities faced a major obstacle. The identities of the two women remained unknown. The remains were skeletal, and in 1987, forensic technology was limited. There was no way to use biometric data or DNA to determine who they were. Without names, the investigation hit a wall. For all the effort put into the case, it eventually went cold. There were no leads, no new witnesses, and no tools available to solve the mystery of who these women were. Detective Matt Filter of the Metro Nashville Police Department later explained the difficulty the investigators faced. He said, "The two women were never identified back in 1987 because they were skeletal remains. One of the victims, referred to as Sheila Jane Doe, was described as a black or African-American biological female between the ages of 20 and 40, standing approximately 5 feet 8 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall. She had black hair, and both her fingernails and toenails were painted in red and yellow. She was found wearing a gold-braided ring with an amber stone and an Elgin gold watch. Based on decomposition, the investigators estimated the year of demise as 1985. With limited forensic resources and no further information, the case remained unsolved for nearly 4 decades. The unidentified women were buried without their names, their stories left incomplete. Meanwhile, their families, unaware of what had happened, likely continued searching or waiting, not knowing the fate that had befallen them. In January 2025, Metro Nashville's Cold Case Unit decided to reopen the decades-old file, this time armed with a powerful new tool, forensic genetic genealogy. The plan was to exhume the unidentified remains buried back in 1987 and extract DNA for advanced analysis. Just 2 days before the scheduled exhumation, an unexpected call changed everything. Detective Filter said, "I got a phone call from a woman who said she had been looking for her mother since the 1980s, since about 1984. Her voice brought a new lead that no forensic technology could have predicted." Acting swiftly, the investigators collected a DNA sample from the woman and submitted it for comparison against the remains already in their possession. In July 2025, soon after the DNA was analyzed, the results confirmed the match. One of the Jane Does was Sheila Cummings from Elgin, Illinois. She had been just 23 years old when her life was taken in 1985. Sheila's daughter, only a child at the time, grew up haunted by the unanswered question of what became of her mother. But even as the years passed, no one imagined Sheila's story was far more tragic and that, unbeknownst to everyone, she had already been found. After all those years of uncertainty and pain, her daughter finally received the answer she had been searching for since childhood. An officer stated, "It is a great feeling to know after 40 years, you are able to finally identify somebody and return them to their family." The identification would not have been possible without the daughter's phone call or the advances in forensic science that made DNA matching through distant relatives a reality. Detective Filter emphasized the significance of the technology. With forensic genetic genealogy, we can now take a DNA sample, upload it to a database, and see how it matches with other people, even distant relatives. It is this very advancement that brought closure to Sheila's family and reignited the hope that the second unidentified woman, with the nickname Little Bit, could also be named. She was a 20 to 40-year-old black female who stood at 5 feet 7 inches and had an open-faced gold overlay on her right lateral incisor. She was also discovered wearing a copper Grim Reaper ring. Anyone with information about her is asked to call Crime Stoppers at 6157-427-463, the MNPD Cold Case Unit at 615-862-7329, or the Davidson County Medical Examiner's Office at 615743. Although the work is far from over, the success in identifying Sheila has breathed new life into the investigation and renewed the commitment of the detectives involved. In March 1977, a woman left Sealy, Texas with her husband and young son for what was supposed to be a healing trip to Georgia. This is the story of a mother lost in silence, a child stolen too soon, and investigators who never gave up. On December 10, 1980, hunters walking through a wooded area west of Highway 231 near Fountain, Florida, discovered the skeletal remains of an unknown woman. The condition of the clothing found with the body raised immediate suspicions. Damage to the fabric suggested that foul play had occurred. With little to go on, the investigators worked to determine the identity of the remains and whether they could be linked to any ongoing or cold cases in the region. Initially, the authorities believed that the remains could belong to Joanne Benner, a 21-year-old mother of 2 who had vanished in 1976 under mysterious circumstances. At the time, Joanne's unsolved disappearance was still an open case, and the timeline and location of the remains seemed to align with her story. However, as forensic experts analyzed the remains more closely, a different truth began to emerge. After a thorough examination, it was determined that the remains did not belong to Joanne. This revelation left the investigators without a clear path forward, and the unidentified woman's case eventually went cold. It would take nearly 45 years before the truth would finally begin to surface. In 2025, advancements in modern technology allowed the Bay County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit to reopen the case and re-examine the unidentified remains. The investigators submitted a tooth to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. From that single tooth, a DNA profile was developed. Once the DNA profile was obtained, it was entered into the combined DNA index system. It did not take long after the profile was uploaded for the investigators to receive a match. In June 2025, that match led directly to Carol Sue Skidmore. Her identification was officially confirmed through DNA comparisons with surviving family members in Texas. Specifically, the samples matched her brother and another sibling, finally linking the remains found in Florida to the mother who had vanished back in 1977. Carol spent her early years in Texas, where she eventually became a mother to a young son named Lynn Dale Mahaffey. By the spring of 1977, 26-year-old Carol's life was facing serious challenges, particularly within her marriage to James Ronald Skidmore. Hoping to repair their fractured relationship, the couple, along with their 5-year-old son, left their home in Sealy, Texas, on March 29th, for what was meant to be a healing visit to James' parents in Rossville, Georgia. Carol last made contact with her family on April 9th, telling them she was not sure when they would return. It would be the last time her family would ever hear from her. Weeks later, in May, tragedy struck when young Lynn's body was discovered in Parksville Lake, Tennessee, wrapped in plastic and submerged. Then, on June 1st, James Skidmore was found deceased in an Arkansas motel room, the victim of substance overdose, leaving behind a cryptic note stating things were not working out for him and no sign of Carol. The investigators would eventually come to the grim conclusion that James was responsible for the fatal end of both his wife, Carol, and their young son, Lynn. They believed that after committing these acts, James took his own life. However, With Carol still missing and no conclusive evidence tying all the pieces together, the case remained shrouded in uncertainty for decades. After years of painful uncertainty, Carol's family finally had confirmation of what had happened to her. For her brother, who had waited nearly half a century for answers, the discovery brought both closure and profound gratitude. Thanks to persistent investigators and evolving science, Carol is no longer a missing person. She is known, remembered, and finally laid to rest. In March 2015, the quiet of a San Francisco Bay Area home in California was shattered by an intruder in the night. It would take months, another violent home invasion, and the work of a private investigator to expose the truth and the man behind the crime. Denise Huskins was born and raised in California. She pursued higher education with a clear focus on helping others, ultimately earning a degree in physical therapy. After completing her studies at Long Island University, Denise first obtained her physical therapy license in Massachusetts. Her career then led her back to her home state, where she secured active licensure in California in October 2013. During her residency in Vallejo, California, Denise met Aaron Quinn, a fellow physical therapist. The two initially connected through their shared profession, finding common ground in their commitment to patient care. Was still recovering from the emotional toll of a recent breakup with a former fiancé. Despite the challenges, they began dating, navigating moments of closeness alongside periods of strain. On March 23, 2015, an intruder broke into Aaron's San Francisco Bay Area home, where he was staying with Denise. In the early hours of the morning, Denise was overpowered, forced into the trunk of the intruder's car, and taken away. Aaron awoke to find messages from the kidnapper, demanding ransom for Denise's return and warning him not to involve the authorities. The tone of the threats was direct and intimidating, leaving Aaron fearful that any attempt to call the police would be detected if he was under surveillance. Unsure of how to proceed, he reached out to his older brother, who worked as an FBI agent, hoping for guidance. His brother's advice was immediate and firm. Call 911 without delay. Following those instructions, Aaron contacted emergency services. By the time the police arrived at his home, approximately 9 hours had passed since Denise's abduction. Instead of focusing solely on the details of the kidnapping, the investigators quickly began questioning Aaron as though he might be a suspect in her disappearance. At the scene, the police asked him if he had been using substances. He explained that the intruder had given him substances, impairing his ability to respond sooner. The delay in contacting the authorities became a central point of suspicion, with the investigators pressing him on why he had waited several hours before making the report. Aaron agreed to accompany police to the station, where he provided a formal statement recounting the events of the night. 2 days after she was taken, Denise's captivity ended when the attacker drove her roughly 500 miles away and released her near her family's home in Huntington Beach. Physically and emotionally shaken, she reported to the police that she had been indecently assaulted during her ordeal and that the attack had been recorded on camera. Her account was detailed and disturbing, underscoring the seriousness of the crime that she had endured. Despite this, the circumstances of her release and the surrounding details fueled skepticism among Vallejo police. Compounding this was information from Aaron's ex-fiancé, who told the investigators that Aaron had discussed the possibility of reconciling with her while still in a relationship with Denise. These claims, paired with the unusual sequence of events, deepened police doubts about the couple's story. The case reached a turning point when Vallejo police held a public news conference. Rather than affirming Denise's account, they accused her and Aaron of staging the kidnapping as an elaborate hoax. They asserted that the incident had wasted significant police resources and demanded a public apology from the couple. In Dublin, California, approximately 40 miles from Vallejo, another disturbing incident unfolded on June 5, 2015. In the middle of the night, a couple was startled awake by an intruder shining a bright light directly into their faces. Acting quickly, the woman ran into the bathroom to call 911. While her husband physically confronted the attacker, the struggle was intense, but the intruder managed to escape the home. In his haste, however, he left behind crucial evidence, including a cell phone, zip ties, duct tape, and a glove, items that would later prove essential to solving a larger mystery. By this time, Denise and Aaron had faced months of public doubt and police accusations. Determined to clear their names, they hired a private investigator, who became instrumental in breaking the case wide open. This investigator meticulously examined the evidence from the Dublin home invasion, starting with the abandoned cell phone. Tracing its registration, she discovered it was linked to the stepfather of a man named Matthew Muller. The search did not stop there. Reaching out to other Bay Area law enforcement agencies, the detective uncovered that Muller had previously been a suspect in a 2009 home invasion robbery in Palo Alto, California. The pattern of his past criminal behavior bore disturbing similarities to Denise's abduction, prompting deeper investigation. The pieces began to align in a way that directly contradicted the Vallejo police's earlier claims that the kidnapping had been fabricated. As the police continued to review evidence from the Dublin case, they came across an item that caught the attention of the FBI. A pair of swimming goggles with the lenses blacked out using duct tape and a strand of blonde hair attached. The detail was significant, suggesting a connection to the Vallejo kidnapping. The authorities flagged this to the federal investigators, indicating that Muller could be the person responsible for abducting Denise. On June 8, 2015, Dublin police arrested Matthew Muller in connection with the local home invasion. His capture marked a turning point, though the full extent of his criminal activity was not yet public. Matthew Daniel Muller was born on March 27, 1977, in California, and raised in the suburbs of Sacramento. He grew up with his younger brother, Kent. They experienced a significant family disruption when his parents divorced during his senior year of high school, following his father's extramarital affair. As a child and teenager, Muller was introverted and endured bullying due to his weight. Yet he was recognized for standing up for others, often fighting for the underdog. He was active in school activities, playing trumpet in the high school band, participating in the computer club, and excelling academically with a high GPA and advanced coursework. He also demonstrated an exceptional aptitude for languages, becoming fluent in English, Spanish, Russian, and German. Muller graduated from Bella Vista High School in 1995 and immediately enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, motivated both by a desire to improve his physical fitness and to finance his future college education. He served 4 years in the Marines, playing trumpet in the United States Marine Band, and traveling internationally to locations including Australia, Abu Dhabi, and the United Arab Emirates. His service included a period with the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing at Marine Corps Air Station El Toro, as well as participation in Operation Pacific Haven. While stationed in Okinawa, Japan, he founded a non-profit organization aimed at teaching locals about the internet and contributed to an off-base bilingual newspaper. In 1999, Mueller was deployed to the Middle East, where he earned 3 service medals and was promoted to the rank of sergeant, achievements that marked him as a decorated Marine. Despite these accomplishments, he began suffering from severe mental health problems, which he described as Gulf War syndrome. Even though he had never engaged in direct combat, these challenges led him to seek and receive an honorable discharge from the Marines, marking the end of his military career. Following his discharge, Muller attended community college before transferring to Pomona College. There, he distinguished himself academically, graduating summa cum laude in 2003. His studies included double majors in economics and science, technology, and society. Within the public policy analysis program, his senior thesis focused on immigration policy, reflecting a growing interest in law and public affairs. That same year, Mueller entered Harvard Law School, where he became actively involved in advocacy and public service. He volunteered at the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, assisting immigrants and low-income tenants affected by domestic violence. His commitment to these causes was evident in his choice of work, often serving vulnerable populations in need of legal representation and support. Mueller earned his jurisdiction from Harvard in 2006, and his connection to the university extended beyond graduation. He remained as a fellow and research assistant in the Immigration and Refugee Clinical Program, where he played a central role in managing the program during the director's sabbatical. The FBI executed a search of Mueller's home, where they uncovered compelling evidence tying him directly to Denise's abduction. Among the items recovered was Aaron's stolen laptop, a tangible link that erased lingering doubts about the couple's account. The discovery of these items not only connected Mueller to the Dublin attack, but also directly implicated him in the high-profile Vallejo kidnapping case. In September 2016, Mueller pleaded guilty in federal court to one count of kidnapping, admitting to a series of calculated actions during the abduction of Denise. He acknowledged using pre-recorded audio messages to create the illusion that multiple people were involved, employing blacked-out swimming goggles, liquid sedatives, and other tools to carry out the crime. His plea marked a formal acceptance of responsibility for the kidnapping, and he was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. Beyond the federal conviction, Mueller faced additional state charges, including kidnapping, burglary, robbery, and 2 counts of assault by force. However, in November 2020, proceedings in the state case were delayed when he was found incompetent to stand trial due to mental health concerns. This determination temporarily halted his prosecution for the indecent assaults and related offenses tied to the Vallejo case. 2 years later, in 2022, Mueller was deemed mentally fit to face the pending charges. In court, he entered guilty pleas to the state counts, bringing further legal closure to the crimes committed against Denise. A holiday turned into a nightmare when a mother woke up convinced something was wrong. And it was. The gruesome events of the night would lay shrouded in mystery for 36 years. But all those years ago, in 1984, a little girl decided she would help find the perpetrator, and she did as an investigator. On Thanksgiving evening in 1984, 14-year-old Wendy Jerome left her friend's house in Rochester, New York, but never made it home. Wendy and her father Wayne had cooked Thanksgiving dinner together. It was a heartwarming thing. Wendy's mom worked as a nurse. She had a tough routine working at the Beechwood nursing home. After dinner, Wendy was helping out her father with the dishes while her mother went to take a nap upstairs. The two planned to eat dessert once the dishes were done and Marlene had awakened from her nap. Her little brother Bill was playing. Born on November 1st, 1970, Wendy had just turned 14 years old a few days ago. She had some independence since her birthday and wanted to do things on her own. Wendy asked her father if she could walk over to her friend Susie Keller's house. It was not that far, just a few blocks away. It was her friend's birthday the following day, and Wendy wanted to give her a birthday card. Wayne allowed it, since her curfew was 8 p.m. anyway, and it was 7, which meant she would be back in no time, waking up with a sudden, overwhelming urge to find her daughter. Marlene was uneasy. She had a bad feeling and ran down the stairs hastily asking, "Where's Wendy?" Wayne reassured Marlene that Wendy was visiting a friend and would be home soon, urging her not to worry. By 8:15 p.m., panic set in as Wendy was still not home. It was only 15 minutes past her curfew, but it was still worrisome as she was never late. Early maybe, but never late. They began calling the Keller family, but received no answer. Hours passed before they finally reached them. Marlene's first question was, "Is Wendy with you?" Susie's mother paused in shock and said, "Marlene, hang up the phone and call the police right now." A short while later, Marlene's worst fears were confirmed when Wendy was found in an alcove alongside School 33. A 22-year-old discovered her lifeless body between Schools 33 and 11. He said that he was heading to a bar when he noticed someone lying down, so he left it alone, initially assuming they were drunk. Upon closer inspection, he saw blood. Afraid, he went to a friend's house before returning to the scene to confirm what he saw prior to contacting the police. Officers on the scene realized she was no more and that she had been brutally assaulted and left to take her last agonizing breaths alone. In 5 minutes, police were at Marlene's door and they told her what happened to Wendy. According to her mother, the schoolyard where Wendy's body was discovered was not on her route to Susie's house. Marlene believes that Wendy, nearing her curfew, may have attempted to visit another friend in the neighborhood and took a shortcut by the school. The initial investigation revealed severe blunt force trauma, including a fractured skull from a significant blow. She had been assaulted, Dr. Nicholas Forbes conducted a medical examination of Wendy's body and determined that severe blunt force trauma to her skull had finally taken her life. Wendy's autopsy further revealed that at least 2 different types of objects were used to cause her bruises and wounds. They could also have been hands. The marks were distinct. They were both blunt force trauma with any object and sharp force trauma caused by something that would cut through her body. Could have been a knife or a piece of glass. The family could not overcome this tragedy. Wayne and Marlene divorced because deep down she blamed her husband for what happened. Bill Jerome, Wendy's brother, was afraid of everything after his elder sister was so brutally taken. He was afraid that the assailant was still out there running free. For the first time in his life, he was afraid of the dark. He would hardly go out to play, and when he did, he was afraid and wary of everyone around him. After the divorce, Wayne moved to Florida. Marlene was not content with what the police were doing. Nearly a decade passed, and Marlene fought hard to know more details of the night. She was not allowed to see the crime scene, visit the body in the morgue, or even look at the photos. Marlene demanded to see the crime scene photos after investigators had informed her that Wendy was unconscious and unaware of what had happened to her that day. They said she passed peacefully. Once she got a copy of the autopsy report, it turned out she was in the dark. Reading the autopsy report repeatedly mentioning defense wounds, Marlene became furious. She felt betrayed, believing they had misled her when she had directly asked them about Wendy's struggle with her assailant. She felt deeply betrayed. Once she saw the photos, she had some closure. She had imagined Wendy to be lying exposed for the world to see, undressed, indecent in a way she would never have wanted to be seen. Marlene suffered for 9 long years before she saw the photos and found a bit of comfort. The photos also showed Marlene what investigators had known all along. Wendy had been dressed, wearing jeans and a brown sweater jacket adorned with unicorns and hearts. Her pink hoodie, which she always carried with her, was placed over her battered face. So whoever committed the heinous act allowed Wendy to get dressed before taking her life so brutally. The investigators had promised Marlene that Wendy went in peace and knew nothing of what happened to her later, including all the blows to her head. But the presence of defensive wounds told a story of absolute terror, as Wendy would have fought for her life, completely aware of what was happening to her, contrary to what the investigators told Marlene. Each birthday, November the 1st, it was hard for the family. They would cry and they would miss Wendy. But Marlene believed one day the perpetrator would be brought to justice. Back in the 80s and 90s, DNA technology was in its initial phases, but years later, forensics would have a chance to bring the perpetrator to justice. Officer Paul Boccaccino spoke to at least 30 people from the neighborhood 6 days after Wendy's tragic demise. The investigation officers also took care to preserve the evidence. The crime scene included objects like a cigarette pack, a lighter, the hair of the perpetrator, and Wendy's clothes. There were some things not investigated enough. The witness was interviewed, but he was not a prime suspect. The fact that he first went to a friend's house, then came back to the crime scene was entirely suspicious. The witness also had the exact same hair type found at the crime scene. He should have been investigated further. 6 years later, he took his own life. Was that an admission of guilt? Initially, investigators focused on another local man who claimed he had been assaulted that night, but was eliminated via blood typing analysis. In 1984, when Julie Hahn was just 11 years old, she learned about the tragic slaying of Wendy Jerome, a case that would deeply impact her and eventually shape her career. Wendy's case haunted Rochester for years, becoming a significant part of the community's consciousness. This early exposure to such a haunting event instilled in Hahn a sense of justice and a drive to pursue a career where she could make a difference. Years later, she became a chief prosecutor in the Major Felony Bureau of the Monroe County District Attorney's Office. Her commitment to justice led her to work on Wendy's case starting in 2011. She went through everything with a fresh perspective and was able to conduct DNA analysis. This included cross-checking the witness who took his own life's DNA. Should the DNA not match with the witness, Hahn had plans to analyze other items found at the scene, such as the cigarette pack and lighter, using advanced high-sensitivity DNA technology. Hahn and her team realized additional evidence could be tested. They conducted familial DNA testing in April of 2019. By July, there was a fresh list of potential suspects. There was evidence from Wendy's clothes and bodily secretions from the crime scene. In 2020, they were able to conduct a familial DNA search. It allows for screening through relatives' DNA profiles. This means anyone sharing the same blood in the family could be accessed if their relative's DNA was on the databank. It brought them to a person questioned all those years ago, who was 20 years old at the time of Wendy's tragedy. His name was Timothy Williams, their next-door neighbor at the time. Police were able to collect a DNA sample from the suspect secretly while he was in Florida. The sample matched the DNA evidence from the crime scene. 36 years later, they finally had a positive match. Williams was finally arrested on September 9, 2020. Hahn was among the investigators who called Marlene. Marlene had remarried Wayne when he was diagnosed with cancer. He passed away in 2011. 36 years after that Thanksgiving night, on a regular Thursday, she received the call she had longed for. Timothy Williams became the first person in the state to go on trial with an arrest relying on familial DNA. During the trial, Williams claimed he had consensual intimacy with Wendy and did not harm her. He expressed fear of being charged with forceful assault if he came forward. He had been questioned all those years ago. He was a neighbor back then, 20 years old. But he lied to the police. Now in custody, he told a very different story. He said he met her at a corner store and believed her to be of age and was in a relationship with her. However, the district attorney countered these claims, highlighting the brutal nature of Wendy's injuries which contradicted Williams' story. Wendy's mother had the following to say about his claims. "My daughter Wendy was the sweetest, the most caring little girl in the whole world. I just want everybody to know no matter what was said, it was not true and she was and always will be my heart." Initially, the trial faced a setback with a mistrial due to juror misconduct. However, a subsequent trial led to Williams being found guilty of 3 counts of second-degree slaying. On April 17, 2024, New York State Supreme Court Justice Alex Renzi sentenced the 60-year-old Williams to 25 years to life in the New York State Department of Corrections. District Attorney Dorley expressed relief and gratitude to the Rochester police investigators, stating that the maximum sentence was the only appropriate action. She emphasized that after all these years, Timothy Williams did not escape justice for the heinous acts he committed against Wendy. Wendy's mother, Marlene, attended the court proceedings and, after the guilty verdict, expressed a bittersweet sense of closure. After 36 years, Timothy Williams believed he got away with it. But thanks to Julie Hahn's relentless pursuit of the truth and a mother's conviction to justice, he was named, shamed, and put behind bars where he belonged. Finally, Wendy Jerome's family had some closure, and the faceless monster from their dreams was caged. Marlene's last words after the sentencing were, "Will it ever be over for me? No, but this door is closed." Ghislaine Potvay was a 19-year-old college student when she was found deceased in her apartment in Jonquière on April 28, 2000, about 215 kilometers north of Quebec City in Canada. Audrey Saint-Pierre said that she and Ghislaine had spent the evening together prior to the demise, but had ended the night early to ensure they were ready to present a big project at school the next day. She returned the next morning to find her friend's body. Audrey described her friend as a conscientious student and a motherly type who was protective of her friends. Ghislaine lived with 2 female roommates, also students, who were not home when the slaying took place inside their Penn 8th Street residence. A pathologist testified that she lost her life due to strangulation with additional injuries, including blunt trauma to her head and shoulder and a bite mark on her left breast. Although male DNA was found on the victim's body and belt at the scene, there was no match in the police database and no witnesses to the crime. The DNA found at the scene was eventually linked to a second incident from St. Foy a few months later, in July 2000. A female student who lived alone was violently assaulted and left for her end, but survived. Unfortunately, there was also no lead and the case went cold. It took 22 years, but in October 2022, the police made a link to the perpetrator using the DNA that was collected at both scenes. A Quebec provincial police investigator, Detective Sergeant Christian Royer and his partner staked out the apartment of Marc-André Grano in Granby in August 2022. After he was identified as a possible suspect, they saw him get into a passenger seat of a car with a woman outside of his apartment, and then they followed them. They then tracked them to a cinema, where they bought tickets to the same film Grano and his companion were watching. After the film, Royer recounted that he and his partner then followed Grano out of the cinema, where they saw him throw his soft drink cup in the garbage can. The officer said that he fished it out after putting on gloves and sent it for DNA testing. The DNA collected from the cup and straws at the theater were found to match the previously unidentified male DNA collected at the crime scene. Grano was arrested in October and charged with first-degree slaying and attempted slaying and assault in connection with the second incident. The DNA match was confirmed through a second DNA test after Grano's arrest. The jury of 12 people learned that Grano had been described in 2001 as a person of interest in the crime, because he had previously lived in a building behind the residence where Guillen lived. Grano pleaded not guilty. On cross-examination, Royer told the defense that he had not taken any photos of the suspect holding the drink or sitting in the cinema. He also acknowledged that the evidence bag had been mislabeled as containing 1 straw, not 2. During the trial, Grano's lawyers admitted that he ended the teenager's life with a belt that was found next to her body, but argued that her demise was a burglary gone wrong. The defense argued that Grano had ended the life of Guillen in a struggle after breaking into the apartment to commit robbery, and that any intimate contact took place after the victim passed away. Defense lawyer Corinne Poliquin suggested a second-degree slaying conviction. Grano did not testify during the trial, and his lawyer did not call any other witnesses. During his final instructions to the jury, Justice Francois Wu said that contrary to what the defense argued, it was not necessary to prove the intimate assault took place before the demise, but only that an assault or attempted assault occurred in the same sequence of events as the slaying. The jury did not hear that Grano was also charged with attempted slaying and intimate assault in connection with the case in St. Foy. The jurors then found him guilty of first-degree slaying in the case of Guillen, and of the aggravated intimate assault of Guillen in her basement apartment. The jury's verdict was delivered on February 20, 2024, after less than 3 hours of deliberation. Spectators in the packed courtroom could be seen hugging and wiping away tears after the verdicts were read. Grano declined the judge's invitation to address the victim's parents, present in the courtroom. Hewitt described Grano as a morally and depraved perpetrator, as he sentenced him to life in prison for first-degree slaying. Hewitt addressed Grano moments after the jury convicted him. He said, "I want to make this clear. I only feel disgust and contempt for the actions you took on April 28, 2000. You are an individual, as I mentioned a few moments ago, who is completely devoid of morality. You are depraved and a slayer." Hewitt described the convicted perpetrator as a coward who attacked a vulnerable victim while she was asleep with her teddy bear, and then went on to enjoy 22 years of undeserved liberty before his arrest. What said, "Tell me, accused, while you were abusing Guillen, did you feel strong? Did you feel courageous? Did you feel like a man, a real one? What a demonstration of force. What a demonstration of courage. It is absolutely disgusting." Outside the courtroom, members of Ghislaine's family said that they hoped she would be remembered for the qualities she embodied in life, rather than the manner of her demise. Her mother, Janine Coet, said, "The extreme violence she was a victim of was the opposite of what she incarnated. Gentleness, calm, goodness, and peace." Grano has pleaded guilty in the second cold case. He admitted to attempting to end the life of that woman. Prosecutor Pierre-Alexandre Bernard said outside the courtroom that Grano pleaded guilty in the second cold case because of the strong and convincing evidence against him, including his DNA found at the scene of the crime. Grano has been sentenced to 15 years in prison for the second case, which he will serve at the same time as the 25-year sentence for Guillen's case. Richard Francis Cottingham is an American serial perpetrator who was convicted in New York of 6 slayings between 1972 and 1980, and convicted in New Jersey of 12 slayings between 1967 and 1978. He was nicknamed by the media as the Torso Perpetrator and the Times Square Ripper, since some of the slayings he was convicted of included mutilation. On May 3, 1970, Cottingham got married at Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Queens Village, Queens. He had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, with his wife. Cottingham was arrested on several lesser charges throughout his slaying spree. The police were not aware of his crimes at the time, nor were they aware that a serial perpetrator was active in the tri-state area. On October 3, 1969, Cottingham was charged and convicted of drunk driving in New York City and was fined $50. On August 21, 1972, he was charged and convicted of shoplifting at a Stearns department store in Paramus, New Jersey, and was sentenced to pay a $50 fine or spend 10 days in jail. On September 4, 1973, he was arrested in New York City for robbery, oral sodomy, and intimate abuse on the complaint of a prostitute and her pimp. Neither complainant appeared in further proceedings, however, and the case was dismissed. On March 12, 1974, Cottingham was arrested in New York City for robbery and unlawful imprisonment on the complaint of another prostitute. Once again, the victim did not appear in further proceedings, and the case was dismissed. In April 1978, Cottingham's wife filed for divorce on the grounds of abandonment and mental cruelty. He kept a locked room in a basement apartment of the house in which they lived in Lodi, New Jersey. In the early morning hours of May 22, 1980, Cottingham picked up 18-year-old prostitute Leslie and Odell, who was soliciting on the corner of Lexington Avenue and 25th Street in Manhattan. They checked into the Hasbrook Heights Quality Inn at room 117. Cottingham offered to give Leslie a massage, and she rolled onto her stomach. As he was straddling her back, he drew a knife and put it to her throat as he snapped a pair of handcuffs on her wrists. He began torturing her, nearly biting off one of her nipples. She later testified that he said, "You have to take it. The other girls did. You have to take it too. You are a lady of the night, and you have to be punished." At one point, Leslie reached under the bed for a fake gun that Cottingham had threatened her with, thinking it was real, and attempted to shoot him with it. When it did not fire, he came at her with the knife. She screamed, "Oh God, no!" The screams brought motel employees to the room, and they summoned the police. Cottingham was arrested in the hallway at gunpoint. When arrested, he had handcuffs, a leather gag, 2 slave collars, a switchblade knife, replica pistols, and a stockpile of prescription pills in his possession. The charges listed in Cottingham's New Jersey indictment included kidnapping, attempted slaying, aggravated assault with a fatal weapon, aggravated intimate assault while armed, possession of a weapon, and possession of controlled substances. Following this arrest, the police found, in the locked room and in the trunk of his car, personal effects which they traced to several of his victims. During his 1981 trial, 3 additional surviving abduction assault victims testified along with Leslie against Cottingham in court, claiming that they had also been abused and tortured by him. 2 of the victims, Susan Geiger and Karen Schilt, identified Cottingham in a police lineup. He was ultimately convicted in the 3 cases of Susan, Leslie, and Karen, and he was acquitted in the other one of Pamela Weisenfeld. 22-year-old pregnant waitress Karen Schilt met Cottingham at 9 p.m. on March 22, 1978. She had exited a 3rd Avenue bar and made her way back to her apartment when she was picked up by Cottingham and driven down Route 80 in New Jersey after being forced to ingest sleeping pills. She was discovered by a patrolman the next morning near the Ledgewood Terrace apartments in a parking lot, motionless. She had been assaulted by Cottingham, who abandoned her in a sewer, naked. 19-year-old prostitute Susan Geiger was approached and propositioned by Cottingham on the night of October 10, 1978, in Manhattan between Broadway and 7th Avenue on West 47th Street. Although Susan informed Cottingham that she had reservations for the remainder of the evening, she left him her contact information at the Alpine Hotel. The subsequent evening, Cottingham called her and asked her out for a date at midnight. He picked Susan up in his vehicle before plying her with a number of drinks filled with substances. Susan later woke up covered in her own blood in room 28 of the Airport Motel in South Hackensack, New Jersey. She had been tortured by Cottingham, who injured her body parts. In addition, he had beaten Susan multiple times with a garden hose and torn her gold earrings out of her ears. On May 12, 1980, prostitute Pamela Weisenfeld was found beaten up in a parking lot in Teaneck, New Jersey. According to the police and medical reports, Pamela's attacker bit her multiple times. After meeting Cottingham, Pamela had been given illegal substances and was brutally beaten, suffering several injuries all over her body. After being found, Teaneck police took her to a hospital. Cottingham's wife withdrew the divorce petition upon his arrest in May 1980, then completed the divorce after his 1981 conviction. Cottingham claims to have started slaying as an adolescent and has claimed to have taken the lives of as many as 100 women. Cottingham often sought prostitutes in their late teens to mid-20s and is believed to have slain people in Florida, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Baltimore. He would approach his victims in bars, give them substances, take them to a remote location, and would bind, gag, torture, and stab them before ending their lives by strangulation. He took trophies like jewelry and other personal items belonging to his victims. Along with the 3 assaults, Cottingham was also convicted in the slayings of 2 women, Marion Carr and Valerie Street, which occurred in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. The body of 26-year-old X-ray technologist Marion Marzi Carr was found at approximately 7 a.m. on the morning of December 16, 1977, between a parked van and a chain-link fence in Little Ferry, New Jersey. She was still wearing her white nurse's uniform, but her shoes were missing. She was last seen on December 15th in the parking lot of the Ledgewood Terrace Apartments, where Cottingham and his wife had previously resided. Cottingham kidnapped her from the apartment complex and took her to a Quality Inn in Hasbrook Heights, where he beat, bit, slashed, and assaulted her. She had been restrained and then strangled with a ligature. Afterwards, Cottingham dumped her in the parking lot of the Quality Inn, not far from the Ledgewood Terrace Apartments. Marion exhibited handcuff-related bruises on her wrists, ankles, as well as remnants of adhesive tape on her mouth. Cottingham was convicted of her slaying on October 12, 1982. On May 5, 1980, the body of 19-year-old Valerie Street, a prostitute, was found by a motel worker at the same Quality Inn where Cottingham had dumped Marion's body. Using an alias, Valerie checked into room 132 with Cottingham, who ended her life and then stuffed her body under the bed for housekeeping to find. The investigators discovered Valerie handcuffed and with 2 ligature marks on her throat. They also determined that she had been gagged with white adhesive tape and she had bite marks all over her body and head. 1 fingerprint belonging to Cottingham was recovered from the ratchet mechanism of the handcuffs left behind on her. He was convicted in her case on June 12, 1981. In a single 1984 trial, Cottingham was convicted in the demises of 3 additional women, which occurred in New York City between 1979 and 1980. Cottingham was convicted of their slayings on July 9, 1984. Staff at the Travelodge Motor Inn in New York City, New York, made a call to the nearby fire department on December 2, 1979. At around 9 a.m., the call was made as a result of the personnel discovering significant smoke. Inside room 417, a Do Not Disturb sign was hanging from the door latch of the room, which had been rented by Carl Wilson since November 29. 2 naked female bodies were discovered by the firefighters on 2 different beds. Prior to their end, the women were brutally assaulted, and their perpetrator burned their bodies. Both women's hands had been severed, and they had also been beheaded. The missing body parts were never found. A later autopsy revealed that both women had been tortured and assaulted while still alive for several days. Data Goodarzi, 22, an Iranian immigrant who worked as a prostitute, was identified shortly afterward. The other victim remains unidentified and is estimated to be aged between 16 and 22. She is referred to as Manhattan Jane Doe. In a 2009 interview, Cottingham admitted to the slayings and claimed that he severed the heads and hands of the victims to prevent their identification, as he was acquainted with Dita and had been seen with her in a bar the night before. 25-year-old Marion Jean Rayner was discovered on May 15, 1980, at the Seville Hotel in New York City. The investigators discovered that her attacker had cut her throat. Her body had also been set on fire as part of the perpetrator's attempt to get rid of evidence. After his initial convictions, Cottingham pleaded his innocence and for decades insisted he had been framed, until admitting in 2009 that he had actually perpetrated the 5 slayings. In 2000, a detective in the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, BCPO, Robert Anzalotti, was tasked with reviewing a series of cold cases from the 1960s and 1970s. Detective Robert believed that Cottingham could be responsible for one or more of those crimes, and so began to interview Cottingham from 2003. In 2010, Cottingham pleaded guilty to a 1967 slaying, then in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Starting in 2014, Cottingham confessed to slaying 3 teenage girls. The BCPO exceptionally closed the 3 teenagers' cold cases with agreement from the victims' families and evidence corroborating the confessions, but kept it a secret from the public for several years to keep Cottingham talking about other cases. It was made public in December 2019. In April 2021, Cottingham confessed to an unsolved 1974 double slaying in Montville, one of New Jersey's most notorious cold cases. The confession was extracted by Detective Robert Weeks before his retirement and was facilitated by Vronsky and by Jennifer Weiss, the daughter of Didi Goodarzi, one of Cottingham's later victims. Vronsky and Weiss had been meeting with Cottingham in prison since the spring of 2017, counseling him to make the confession. In March 2023, Detective Robert elicited another confession from Cottingham, the slaying of a 17-year-old who vanished in 1967. Marion Della Sulla disappeared at the end of her shift at 9 p.m. on January 24, 1967, from a ShopRite store at 330 Essex Street in Hackensack, New Jersey. Her body was found 3 months later on April 20th in the Passaic River in Hawthorne, New Jersey. She had been strangled and there was no sign of assault. The police concluded that she was slain elsewhere and then thrown into the river. 29-year-old Nancy Bubby Shareva Vogel, a married mother of 2, was found deceased in her automobile, bound and naked, in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey, on October 30th, 1967. She was last seen 3 days earlier in Little Ferry, when she left home to play bingo with friends at a local church. Instead, Nancy chose to do her shopping in a mall in Bergen County. Cottingham met her at the shopping center and kidnapped her. He took her to a field in Montvale and strangled her there. Nancy and Cottingham were acquaintances, and he was convicted of her slaying on August 25, 2010. 13-year-old Jacqueline Leah, Jackie Harp, vanished on July 17, 1968, in Midland Park, New Jersey, after she failed to come home from band rehearsal at her school. The next morning, on July 18th, her body was discovered at Gothel Brook. She had been beaten about the face and had been strangled with the leather strap from her flag sling. The police believed that the attack was sexually motivated, despite the fact that she had not been assaulted since her clothes were in disarray. Cottingham claimed that he attempted to persuade her to get into his car, but she resisted. He then drove his car in front of her, stopped, and walked over to her. He caught up to her despite her attempts to flee, dragged her into a cluster of bushes, and ended her life. 18-year-old Irene Blase was reported missing on April 7, 1969. The next day, on April 8th, she was discovered face down in 4 feet of water in Saddle River, New Jersey, strangled with the chain from a crucifix she was wearing. Cottingham confessed that he saw her shopping in Hackensack and convinced her to join him for a drink. Taking a cab to another location, Cottingham and Irene spent some time together, after which Cottingham offered to bring her back to the bus station. He then drove Irene to a remote location against her will before assaulting and slaying her. On July 13, 1969, at approximately 8 p.m., 15-year-old Denise Velasca left her residence on Bergenline Avenue in Gloucester, New Jersey, on her way to meet friends in Westwood, New Jersey. Denise was supposed to be home by 11 p.m., but she never showed. At around 9 p.m., witnesses claimed to have seen Denise heading along Old Hook Road in Emerson, in the direction of Westwood. Her body was found on the side of Westminster Place in Saddlebrook, New Jersey, the following day on July 14th. Denise, according to Cottingham, was walking down the side of the road in Emerson when he pulled up next to her and offered her a ride. Shortly after, he drove to the parking lot of his former school, where he forced her to perform acts on him, but he was dissatisfied with her inexperience and ended her life. On August 9, 1974, 16-year-old Lorraine Marie Kelly and 17-year-old Mary and Pryor left North Bergen, New Jersey, with plans to go shopping at the Garden State Plaza in Paramus, New Jersey. Mary's boyfriend left the two off at a bus stop on Broad Street in Ridgefield, New Jersey. They intended to hitchhike from there. Their bodies were found 5 days later on August 14th in a wooded location close to the Ridgemont Gardens complex in Montvale, New Jersey. They were naked and bound to one another at the wrists and ankles while lying face down next to each other. Both had been beaten and assaulted. The ligature marks on their necks suggested that they had likely been strangled as well. Both also had cigarette burns on their flesh. Cottingham was convicted of both of their slayings on April 27, 2021. In court, Cottingham admitted to kidnapping the girls and then tying them up and assaulting them both in a motel room. He then drowned them in the bathtub. On August 26, 2022, with a non-prosecution agreement, officials in Rockland County, New York corroborated and accepted Cottingham's confession to the 1970 slaying of 26-year-old Lorraine McGraw. Cottingham's additional confession to a 1974 slaying was discounted by Rockland County Police. In June 2022, Cottingham was arraigned from his prison hospital bed for the 1968 slaying of Diane Cusick. The authorities believed it to be, thus far, the oldest criminal case to be solved and prosecuted by direct DNA evidence. 23-year-old Diane, a Long Island dance teacher, was found deceased on February 16, 1968, in the back seat of her car, a 1961 Plymouth Valiant, outside the Green Acres Mall in Valley Stream, New York, with adhesive tape around her mouth and neck. She had been beaten, assaulted, and strangled. Her hands had defense wounds. DNA from male DNA discovered at the crime scene was extracted, and it matched a sample retrieved from Cottingham. Near the Green Acres Mall, there was a drive-in theater that Cottingham frequently visited. The authorities believed that Morgan Bauer was born on April 13, 1996, in Memphis, Tennessee. She was the only child of Sherry Keenan and an unknown father. Morgan grew up in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and graduated from Central High School in 2014. She was a pretty girl with blue eyes and brown hair. Morgan had a passion for music and art and aspired to become a tattoo artist. She had a number of tattoos herself. One of those tattoos was a butterfly that symbolized her freedom and transformation. Her other tattoos were a sun-moon near her right shoulder inside a Celtic design, an anchor with the words, "Whatever you love can be taken away, so live like it's your last day." On her left wrist a blue and orange jellyfish on her arm from her inner wrist to elbow and a black tree and flowers on the back of her neck. She also had her ears gauged, and her lip pierced twice. Morgan was an avid reader and writer, enjoying books from all different genres. She also wrote poems and stories on her blog. Morgan was a talented dancer and performer and had been dancing since she was 3 years old. She participated in various competitions and shows. She started dating Jose Rodriguez when she turned 18. The two of them met online. Morgan also had a dream of becoming a journalist or photographer. She always carried her camera with her. Morgan was active on different social media platforms. She posted photos of herself and her friends, as well as inspirational quotes and memes, especially on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. She had thousands of followers who admired her beauty and personality. Morgan loved to travel and explore new places. She had visited 13 states in the U.S. and had plans to visit more. She decided to leave the small town of Aberdeen in South Dakota and move to Atlanta, Georgia, in search of a new independent life. She left on February 12, 2016. Morgan had a pet cat named Luna, whom she adored. She adopted Luna from a shelter and left the cat with her mother when she moved. Morgan had $20 to her name and was expecting a tax refund. She stayed with a man she had met on Craigslist for the first night in Atlanta. Their arrangement included that Morgan clean the house until she managed to find a job. Unfortunately, this agreement did not work out between the two roommates. She then stayed at different hotels. Morgan took a job as a dancer in a Gainesville, Georgia club called the Top of Gainesville. She and her mother were in contact every day or every other day through social media or phone calls. Morgan also remained in contact with friends until February 25, 2016. It was then that she abruptly went silent. On that specific evening, she was dancing at Top of Gainesville. Afterwards, Morgan's coworker, and her coworker's boyfriend all left the club together. They dropped Morgan off at the Citgo gas station in Covington, where she got into a green Eclipse with an unknown driver. That would be the last time Morgan was seen alive. Her mom, Sherry Keenan, became concerned when she could not reach Morgan. She decided to go to Atlanta to find Morgan. Sherry went to the last motel that Morgan was staying in. There, she found that all of Morgan's luggage was still in place. This indicated to her that Morgan did not run away. Sherry then talked to Morgan's boyfriend, Jose Rodriguez, to hear if he knew anything about where she could possibly be. Jose told her that he loved Morgan and was worried about her safety as well. He also said that he had not seen her or heard from her. On March 8, 2016, after not hearing from Morgan for over a week, Sherry Keenan reported her daughter as missing to the Atlanta Police Department. According to her cell phone records, officers determined that Morgan's last phone call was made to Jose on February 25, 2016. In Morgan's last Instagram video, she was seen walking in the Yellow River Park in Newton County, Georgia. An unidentified man could be seen walking behind her. Morgan's Instagram was private, but Sherry Keenan said a friend of her daughter's sent her a screenshot of Morgan's last post. It showed that it was posted on February 26, 2016, a day after she was seen climbing into the green Eclipse. That meant police were looking in the wrong places based on an incorrect timeline. Investigators tried to identify the man in the video to gather information, but they were unable to do so. Multiple law enforcement agencies got involved in the attempt to locate Morgan. Family members spoke to news outlets to share more information about the missing teen. Her disappearance sparked a massive online search due to the huge following she had. She had moved to the Atlanta area only about 2 weeks before she went missing, leaving nothing but unanswered questions in her absence. Despite investigators' best efforts, they were unable to locate Morgan. They did not know if she left willingly or if foul play was involved. Sherry Keenan said in 2019, "There is not a lot of information out there. Morgan is a cold case, but an active cold case with the Atlanta Police Department." Family and friends held a vigil on February 25, 2023, where they remembered the young woman who went missing when she was only 19 years old. Sherry Keenan said, "I am not ready to say goodbye until she is found." She organized the Saturday vigil at the Yellow River Park in Newton County. This was the same park as the one where Morgan was last seen. The next update on the case came on July 27, 2023. It was then that police said they had new information, which they could not make public. The information had prompted investigators to go back and review the case from the beginning. It then led to a search warrant for a property on 2 South Broad Street in Atlanta. Based on the new information, it was suspected that Morgan's remains might be buried there. Police reported that the current owner of the house cooperated with the investigation and was not considered a suspect. The location of 2 South Broad Street is about a 10-minute walk from the park where Morgan was last seen. Authorities searched both the home and the large area of open property. The Porterdale Police Department, in conjunction with the FBI and the Atlanta Police Department, conducted a one-day search on July 27th to retrieve evidence related to the missing person case. There were several tents set up in a wooded area near the large home. Police released videos of FBI agents slowly combing the property in grid formation. Police said after the search that they believe Morgan's life was taken and her body was dumped. Police did not specify what they found that led to this conclusion, since they did not find Morgan's body. Sergeant Michael Walden gave feedback and said that their search led to the location of items of evidentiary interest. However, they could not reveal additional information. Morgan's mom, Sherry, had this to say during the search. "I believe Morgan, if she was still here, she would have reached out. Even if she did not want to talk to me, she would have reached out to her grandma. She added that the last time she saw her baby girl, she gave her something to keep her safe. We did not really talk. I gave her a penny though. I told her to put the penny in her pocket and to keep it with her to keep her safe. She was with a friend, but I do not know who he was. They walked off and that was the last time I ever saw her. Sherry referred to an unknown man that was with Morgan before she left for Atlanta. Sherry suspected the new information and the search of the property would unveil something big in her daughter's case. Casey McClure, who runs an organization that provides outreach to exploited women and has helped in the search since it began, said, "It all goes back to the couple that was last seen with Morgan." McClure also said that the investigators have spoken directly to the couple, acting on a tip. They were identified by officers and were publicly referred to by their last names, Goebel and Warren. McClure said Goebel was very sweet and polite and well-mannered and seemed concerned about Morgan. Warren was very rigid. On Saturday, August 5, 2023, the City of Porterdale Police Department posted the following on Facebook. Porterdale police officers obtained arrest warrants and 2 persons have been arrested in this ongoing investigation. Investigators are still actively working on this case, and it is continuing to develop while they are in constant communication with our district attorney and his office. Police Chief Jason Cripps said in the arrest announcement that he was grateful for the help of the other agencies. This was finally a new update in the over 7-year disappearance of Morgan. 27-year-old Jonathan Alexander Warren was arrested in Los Angeles in connection to Morgan's case. He was charged with 4 felonies, taking Morgan's life, hiding that fact, aggravated assault, and tampering with evidence. In accordance with California law, Warren's mugshot was not released. He apparently lived in the area where Morgan was last seen at the time that she disappeared. Warren has a long list of previous offenses. He has charges of fleeing or attempting to elude, driving without headlights in the dark, driving while license is suspended or revoked, and reckless driving. He was 22 years old when he committed these crimes. Most importantly, his address was listed as 2 South Broad Street, Porterdale. This is the same address where the latest search for evidence was done. 27-year-old Caitlin Goebel was arrested in Peoria, Illinois, also in connection to Morgan's case. She was charged with 2 felonies, concealing the fact that she assisted in taking Morgan's life as well as tampering with evidence. She is currently being held in Peoria County Jail. Her mugshot was also not released. The nature of the relationship between Morgan and the couple was not confirmed by police. Newton County District Attorney Randy McGinley said his office is hopeful that Morgan's family will soon see justice. I always look at it from the victim's perspective, or in this case, the victim's family. This family has been waiting for years, not knowing what has happened. He also said that right now they were still waiting on Warren and Goebel to be extradited back to Newton County, so they can begin to review the case files. We do not usually have the entire case file until the arrest is made, so we need time to review the case file, McKinley added. On Monday, August 7, 2023, Morgan's mother was not ready to speak on camera about the news of the arrests, but instead posted an update on the massive Missing Morgan Facebook page. Sherry Keenan described Morgan as charismatic, gentle-hearted, beautiful, and funny. She also said that Morgan was her best friend and that she missed her terribly. "What we cannot share is speculation," she wrote. "Please understand, legally and currently, Morgan is still considered a missing person. While we are so grateful that arrests have been made, this is an ongoing investigation." Paxton Gilbert, a friend of Morgan, had this to say after the arrests. "It is a big shock. They were the last 2 people to be seen with my friend Morgan. I just want to know what happened, you know. They told investigators. They even told her mom. They dropped her off at a gas station. And that is the last they saw of her." The new information that investigators received was an informant that said investigators should take a new look at Warren and Goebel. The evidentiary items found at the couple's home confirmed to investigators that they were responsible for taking Morgan's life. The hope is that the couple will admit to what they did and tell investigators where Morgan's body can be found, so that Morgan's family and friends can start the healing process. Eileen Cotter was born in 1952, 3 years after her parents moved from Ireland to England. Her father, Patrick Cotter, was a laborer. In 1967, 15-year-old Eileen found the body of her mother, who sadly took her own life. Eileen left school at 16 and worked at a holiday camp in Berry Island in Wales. Later on, she found work at a care home in Ireland. Just after 2 p.m. on June 1, 1974, a resident at a block of apartments in Hamilton Park, Highbury, North London, saw what she thought was a bundle of rags in the courtyard next to a block of garages. Another resident realized it was a body and asked her father to call the police. When police arrived at the scene, they documented that the female body was lifeless. The body was identified as Eileen Cotter's. She was 22 years old at the time. Eileen was found strangled, with her one eye black and bruises on her face and neck. She was lying face down with her lower body exposed and her underwear and tights pulled down. Her handbag, glasses, and shoes were missing. Eileen Cotter's father released a statement detailing his daughter's short life marred by family tragedies after her body was found. A forensic examination was done on her body. A pathologist found that the cause was manual strangulation. DNA samples were recovered from 2 places on Eileen's body. The DNA was used to extract DNA profiles, but unfortunately, no matches could be made at the time. Police interviewed 92 potential suspects and carried out an extensive operation to identify local curb crawlers in their effort to find the attacker. Unfortunately, he was not identified and her case went unsolved. In 2012, 37 years after Eileen's body was found, the investigation was reopened following advances in DNA profiling. The trail went cold for 7 more years, until 2019, when John Applegren came to the attention of police for attacking his wife and Smythe Applegren. He lived in the same area as Eileen when the crime was committed. John Applegren is an 80-year-old pensioner who was formerly a minicab driver and a bricklayer. He is from South Africa and had previously been married in South Africa to a woman with whom he had 2 children. It is not clear if and Smythe Applegren is his second or third wife, as there are no details of a second wife, although many sources call and his third wife. It was in February 2019 that he was arrested for domestic assault by his then-wife and Applegren. There was a breakthrough when police took Applegren's DNA for the first time. The sample was a 1,000,000,000 probability of a match to the DNA collected from Eileen Cotter's body. When interviewed, he claimed that he did not know Eileen, but accepted he had relations with other women during his marriage. On June 22, 2022, John Applegren was arrested and charged with the slaying of Eileen Cotter. The arrest was made after investigators concluded that Applegren is 100% responsible for what happened to Eileen. Detective Chief Inspector Lawrence Smith said that if someone knocked on his door and arrested him for a crime of almost 50 years ago, he would repeatedly plead his innocence until he could no longer speak. That was not him. He was very calm about it. He had an aura of, dare I say, evilness about him. Applegren appeared at the Bromley Magistrates Court on Thursday, June 23, 2022, where he was remanded into custody. The judge fixed a trial of up to 4 weeks from June 6, 2023. Opening the prosecution's case, Prosecutor Alexandra Healy said that DNA samples taken from Eileen's body in 1975 matched those of John Applegren of Bridden Close in Sydenham, southeast London. During the trial, she told jurors that in 2019, Applegren had come to the attention of police for attacking his wife. The court heard Applegren was seen on the night of the slaying in 1975 at a Finsbury Park hot dog stall where Eileen would often go. Miss Healy also told the jury that it appeared Eileen had been pushed out of a car after she and Applegren had intercourse. She described to the court her body was discovered in the position it fell, without shoes and with her tights and underwear still around her right leg. Applegren hit Eileen in the face and throttled her before throwing her body out of his car. The defendant was 31 at the time. This happened just 6 weeks after the birth of his first child with his then-wife, and Applegren told police in 1975, when he was interviewed as a potential suspect, that he was living in Leighton and never went to the Finsbury Park and Highbury area, which was a lie. Miss Healy also said, Eileen did not have the defendant's DNA on her underwear and tights because she never pulled them up after they were together. She never pulled them up because she was not alive anymore. During the court case, it was revealed that Eileen and Anne were most definitely not Applegren's only victims. Applegren assaulted an 18-year-old female guest at his own wedding to Anne Applegren on October 14, 1972. Ms. Healy told jurors the incident only came to light years later. When police interviewed Anne Applegren as part of the reinvestigation into Eileen's case in 2012, Ms. Healy told jurors that Applegren had pushed the 18-year-old woman against a wall after she left the toilet at his wedding reception and assaulted her. The victim had not told anyone about the incident, as she was afraid she would be blamed. The teenager told Anne Applegren about the assault after the pair later divorced. Anne Applegren, mother of two, also revealed that she had been mistreated and that Applegren had once grabbed her neck with both hands. She added that she believed he was cheating on her just months after their 1972 marriage and later found out he was sleeping with her brother's wife. After 11 hours of jury deliberation, Mrs. Justice May announced the jury's final decision. She told Applegren that putting your hands around a young woman's neck and squeezing hard carried a high risk which ought to have been obvious. The judge added, Eileen must have been terrified. The jury found Applegren guilty on Friday, June 16, 2023, following a 2-week trial. In addition to being found guilty of manslaughter, he was also convicted of indecent assault. Justice May then sentenced Applegren to 10 years for manslaughter and a further 6 months for the earlier assault to run consecutively. This means he will be eligible for release on parole after 5 years and 3 months on June 21, 2028. When he is 85 and hopefully worm food and mitigation, Justin Rouse listed Applegren's health problems, saying the defendant would be affected significantly by serving his sentence. Detective Chief Inspector Lawrence Smith said Eileen's life was tragically ended at a young age with her body then discarded onto the street. When my team reviewed the original investigation, we were impressed by how thorough it was. Investigators at the time used every available method to find the suspect, including operations with decoy women. This was a tactic used at the time where female police officers under protection were placed at the scenes of crimes in efforts to draw out predatory men. Smith continued, unfortunately, they did not have the science available to us now, and although he should have been in prison decades ago, he has now been brought to justice. Investigating violence against women and girls is a priority for the Metropolitan Police, and we will relentlessly pursue predatory men, whether a crime took place decades ago or today. Eileen's half-brother, Patrick Cotter, who was 5 at the time of her demise, said in a statement, Eileen and I shared the same father. My mother cared for Eileen as her own mother passed away. I was not only deprived of a sister I had little time to get to know, the knock-on effect also meant I lost my mother, who took her own life, and my father to mental illness and alcoholism. This was all brought about because John Applegren took Eileen's life. 3 years after Eileen's strangling, my mother took her own life as the relationship between her and my father broke down significantly. Due to the fighting between them, I was placed in a care home where I suffered abuse until the age of about 11. It was never explained to me why I was placed in care, and I lived most of my childhood believing it is because of something I had done wrong. His statement continues, again, being a young child, I struggled to understand, with little explanation given to me. My father drank heavily, but Eileen's demise and the loss of my mother caused him to drink even more, and he was eventually admitted to Springfield Psychiatric Hospital. Following this, my father went to live with his brother in Ireland. However, his drinking became too much and he also passed away. According to Patrick Cotter Jr., he has no memory of Eileen's funeral and has no idea whether she was buried or cremated. He also has no idea where she was laid to rest. As a result, he had never been able to visit her grave. Patrick continued, I spent a very unhappy childhood moving amongst various care homes and foster homes. However, when I was 14 years old, I was placed with my foster parents, John and Yvonne. I was very fortunate to be placed in a loving, caring home. They explained various aspects of my life that I did not know or understand, filling in the gaps, so to speak. I also had a half-brother from my mother, who was 17 years older than me. However, when I was taken into care, he was told to avoid any contact with me. I felt as though I lost him as well. He was someone I was very fond of and have happy memories of, but this was also taken from me. Patrick Cotter concluded, "I would like to see justice for Eileen, whose life was cruelly cut short 49 years ago. As a result of the traumatic event during my childhood, I shut down emotionally. It has made it difficult for me to form close relationships. I only have very faint memories of my sister, but I believe she cared for me." 12-year-old Jennifer Renee Odom was a 7th grader at Thomas E. Whiteman Middle School in Wesley Chapel, Florida, in 1993. She played the clarinet in a school band, and she was also a barefoot water skier who placed high in tournaments. Often, she was the skier who climbed to the top of the human pyramid, gliding atop the water. Jennifer was born on August 25, 1980. She was the eldest daughter of Renee Converse and stepdad Clark Converse. She had a 9-year-old sister, Jessica and Odom, and was the granddaughter of Jim and Margie Denny. They lived in St. Joseph, a small community near Dade City, Florida. Jennifer and Jessica had a rabbit called Beanie. Jennifer also absolutely loved her Springer Spaniel, Gypsy. The two sisters built forts, rode four-wheelers, and spent summer days swimming in the creek behind their house on the family's 15-acre property. It was a crisp morning on Friday, February 19, 1993, when Jennifer Odom put on her white jeans and white turtleneck in order to get ready for school. She put a red cashmere sweater, a gift from her grandmother, over her shoulder-length chestnut-color hair. She was slim and tan due to spending a lot of time outdoors. On that same morning, after lacing up her pair of black boots, she got into the car with her mother. The two drove 200 yards up the winding lime rock driveway to wait for the school bus near their mailbox. Jennifer climbed onto the bus and took her usual spot on the back seat so she and her mother could see each other until Renee, following behind, turned left to head to work. After school, at around 3 p.m., Jennifer stepped off her school bus, waved goodbye to her friends, and started walking the short 200 yards to her home. At about 4 p.m., Jennifer's sister arrived at their home from school to find it locked and unable to enter. She then called their mother to tell her that her big sister was not home yet. Renee Converse then realized Jennifer must not have made it home. She called Jennifer's best friend, Michelle, who stated that she saw Jennifer exit the bus and begin walking home. Jennifer's mother knew something was very wrong and called the police. Within hours, deputies launched a wide-scale search. A search party of about 400 volunteers was formed to help scour about 60 square miles of countryside. Family, friends, neighbors, and other volunteers searched for Jennifer. Law enforcement was equipped with police dogs to fine-comb the rolling groves, pastures, and woods surrounding the tiny Pasco County town of Dade City. Every law enforcement agency in the Bay Area was looking for a blue truck that was seen in the area by some of her classmates. Children riding the school bus with Jennifer remembered seeing an older, light blue, unknown model, pickup truck, slowly following Jennifer down the road in the direction in which she was walking. The children described it as having a silver-painted rear bumper, not chrome, and a trailer hitch with wires hanging and pipes or a ladder in the back. The driver was described by the children as a white male in his 40s with shoulder-length brown hair. The blue truck was the focus of the search parties, as investigators believed that the driver may have been involved in the disappearance of Jennifer. As a last resort to find the truck, the FBI as well as Hernando and Pasco County Sheriff's personnel worked from a dock and boathouse, as drivers searched Lake Jovita for the vehicle. 6 days after Jennifer vanished, on Thursday, February 25th, a man and a woman searching an abandoned orange grove about 10 miles north of Jennifer's school bus stop found her badly decomposed nude body. Her body was found near a horse trail off Powell Road south of Brooksville amid a cluster of pine trees in the orange grove. She was found viciously assaulted and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. Detectives said she likely lost her life there in the woods, not long after her disappearance. Hernando County Sheriff Alninhu has stated, "We are not exactly sure how long her abductor kept her captive or when exactly the slaying took place, but we are relatively confident it took place in that field." He added, "Every one of us, including those in law enforcement, can look at Jennifer as our niece, our sister, our granddaughter, and realize that it is a tragedy beyond tragedy. Jennifer's clothing was never found, neither the blue truck nor its driver. While Jennifer's family was still busy with her funeral arrangements, country music star Vince Gill was scheduled to sing at the local Strawberry Festival on Monday, March 1st, 1993. Jennifer's stepfather, Clark Converse, said the girls had looked forward to Gill's performance for weeks, hoping they could get him to autograph photos. Before the concert, Clark Converse and Jessica went to the festival to fulfill Jennifer's wish that Gill autograph a photo in which Jennifer and her sister had posed with the singer at a previous concert on January 10th. Between shows, festival vice president Joe Newsom took the 3 snapshots to Gill, who was eating dinner. Jennifer's stepdad had asked that Gill autograph one for Jessica, one for Jennifer, and one for both girls. Newsom said afterwards, "I told Gill this young lady had been slayed and her dad was outside." Gill replied that he remembered hearing about the incident. He, who also had a young daughter, autographed the photos, writing on one, "To Jennifer, may God be with you," as both Gill and Newsom wept. Gill then went to the night's second show. Before singing the last song, he told the audience about Jennifer. "I'm going to try to get through this the best I can," he said, his voice cracking. Gill sang his Grammy-winning hit, "I Still Believe in You," and dedicated it to Jennifer, who was tragically robbed of her life. Midway through the song, with tears running down his face, Gill asked the crowd to help him finish. Nearly 15,000 voices joined in. Radio personality Jeff Moore stood backstage and looked out at thousands of tear-stained faces. "It was heart-ripping," he said afterwards. Unfortunately, with no one in the community providing investigators with useful information, her case went unsolved. 13 months before Jennifer was abducted, on January 16, 1992, a 17-year-old girl was kidnapped as she got off a school bus in north-central Pasco County. She was found in a pool of blood behind an abandoned house, brutally attacked, assaulted, and beaten. Sheriff Neenhuis said she suffered injuries to her head and skull that were very significant. She survived, but her life was forever changed as she was paralyzed on her left side. Neenhuis said she was a former honor roll student and track and field participant and was a true victim. She was not engaged in a high-risk lifestyle. Law enforcement was able to collect DNA from the crime scene at the time. Since there were similarities between what happened to Jennifer and the unnamed girl, detectives believed the cases may be related. Both victims were adolescent girls who were abducted after getting off of the school bus in Pasco County, taken to a remote field, assaulted, and abandoned with the belief they will succumb to their injuries. The other victim was found just a few miles from where Jennifer's body was found. After a series of blind alleys, the police called upon psychic Nancy Meyer 16 months after the incident to assist in finding the person responsible for what happened. Nancy Meyer is a psychic from Pennsylvania who has been working with police around the country for decades. According to Nancy, she had consulted in more than 300 criminal investigations and had offered critical clues more than 80% of the time. Nancy believed that 2 men were involved in taking. She described them as white, muscular mechanics, and she said one may be a smoker with a heavy cough. The crime scene photographs were classified. Therefore, Nancy Meyer was not allowed to see it. Despite this, she was able to visualize 2 men in detail. She was taken to the site where Jennifer's body was found. Nancy pointed out that there were belongings in a nearby area that had not yet been discovered. She was able to describe several of Jennifer's items that were still missing, including her cousin's clarinet case with the letters LO on them. She continued to give information about the perpetrators in hope of solving the case. Detective Carlos Douglas of the Hernando County Sheriff's Office said, "Nancy Meyer was extremely accurate on some things that led us to look in other areas that we had not thought of. So we obtained a lot of information from what she had to offer." On December 2, 1994, Jennifer's unsolved case was aired on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries on national TV. After the show aired, more than 50 phone tips and even more investigative leads from around the country arrived by mail at the Hernando County Sheriff's Office. A spokesman of the Sheriff's Office said, "The show did for us what we wanted it to do. It got us some more exposure." Despite the new exposure, former Hernando County Sheriff's Major Gary Zorn Smith, who oversaw the investigation in its early years, said that investigators were stumped. He said there was a strong possibility the crime would go unsolved. And what's even worse is that if we solve it, it may take another crime to do it, he said at the time. Approximately 2 years after Jennifer's body was found, on Thursday, January 5, 1995, a couple hunting for scrap metal in a rural area of Hernando County discovered Jennifer's missing book bag and clarinet case. It was found several miles from the location of her body. Police were able to lift fingerprints from her backpack and clarinet case from what is believed to be the person responsible. Unfortunately, there was never a hit in the database for a suspect matching these fingerprints. Over the years, the case garnered national attention and haunted the Tampa Bay region. Thousands of dollars in reward money offered for tips went unclaimed. Detectives logged tens of thousands of hours chasing leads. Jennifer's family waited for news as the years turned to decades. Jennifer's mother, Renee Converse, wondered if it was somebody Jennifer knew. Clark Converse, Jennifer's stepfather, added, "There is a real chance that the person who did it is somebody we have contact with. If they catch someone, we're going to be thrown into the spotlight. Learning how to deal with a trial and confronting this person is going to throw us to square one in learning to deal with this." Renee said she cries a bit more each year. The reality is that Jennifer is gone and will never be in our lives again. Nothing is going to change that. She also said that the family is thankful for what they do know. "We are blessed that we have this much closure. We are not looking for her. We know where she is." It is going to be a bittersweet finale. She could still picture her 12-year-old daughter, slim and sun-kissed, waving goodbye out the back window of the Pasco County school bus. It was the last time she would see her brown-eyed firstborn girl. Renee recounts the last words being spoken between the two as, "I love you." The couple said they have done everything possible to cooperate in finding Jennifer Slayer. They wanted the person found so that no one else got hurt. On Monday, February 19, 2007, the St. Petersburg Times reported that it marked 14 years since the unsolved abduction and subsequent slaying of Jennifer. In that same year, members of Hernando County Crime Stoppers handed out special playing cards to inmates at the Hernando County Detention Center. Each card featured a brief description of an unsolved case from around the state and a hotline number. Jennifer's card was the Queen of Diamonds and featured 2 color photos. A website has been set up by the Hernando Sheriff's Office with pictures and information about Jennifer. A slideshow was also put together with photos of Jennifer set to a mournful soundtrack. Hernando County Detective George Lloydgren later headed the cold case unit. He was armed with the latest DNA technology and a disturbing theory. "I believe that there is probably one person, if not more, that would know who is responsible for this," he said. He also believed that person could be a family member or ex-spouse, either protecting the perpetrator or too afraid to come forward. "I think the reason people do not want to get involved is they may not want to sit there and have to testify against that individual." Over the years, a couple of anonymous tips came in that led investigators to believe that there are several people out there with more information, and the investigators wanted them to come forward. They tried various methods of generating new leads, from billboards and a $20,000 reward to a documentary on national TV. Investigators amassed some 1,000 pieces of evidence, took thousands of tips, and conducted hundreds of interviews over time to try to determine who took Jennifer's life. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reached out to the sheriff's office and offered to scan every piece of paper in Jennifer's case so it would be readily available. It was more than 75,000 pieces of paper. During all the investigations, there were clues, including the fingerprints on Jennifer's clarinet case and backpack. There were also suspects. Serial offender Frank Theniel Potts was a possible suspect. He assaulted a 10-year-old girl in Lakeland in 1993. At the time of the slaying, he was working on a construction site in Pasco County and owned a blue pickup truck, which he allegedly later dismantled. Authorities were unable to link him to Jennifer's case. However, another possible suspect was Walter Ducharme, who lived in the area at the time of the slaying. His ex-wife claimed that he was responsible for it. However, her testimony was inconsistent. When the case against him was presented to a grand jury, he was not indicted. He was no longer believed to be involved in the case. In February 2015, Detective George Lundgren was contacted by Pasco County Sheriff Chris Naco. According to him, New technology had led to a solid lead in the 1992 case in which the teenage girl was found alive. It was the case investigators believed was linked to Jennifer's. The odds of finding another match, NACO said, was 1 in 7.7 million, a number with 30 zeros. Lloydgren commented, "I think DNA is going to be a big part of Jennifer's case, as it is with any of the old cases, because items were collected. It is just now that the technology has advanced. The biological evidence found in the investigation of the 1992 case was tested before February 2015, and detectives got a full DNA profile. Investigators used a DNA procedure known as familial searching, which allows law enforcement to find a suspect by comparing male DNA left at the scene with that of family members. The shortfall of a standard DNA search is that a suspect's genetic fingerprint must be on file in the offender database for law enforcement to make a match. Sheriff Neenhuis said until 2015 there were no leads on that particular piece of DNA. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement compared the DNA to local DNA to see if there were any close matches, which would be a family member. The sheriff said they found the DNA matched that of Jeffrey Crum, who was in jail at the time. Investigators then obtained DNA samples from Crum's brother, father, and grandfather. A direct comparison between the DNA found on the victim and that of Crum's father found a match. Investigators concluded that Jeffrey Crum took the girl from the 1992 case by the arm and let her be behind the abandoned house, where he hit her head with a blunt object so hard it crushed part of her skull and caused her to lose part of her brain, leaving her paralyzed on the one side. This then finally led to the arrest of Jeffrey Crum, 53 years old at the time, in connection to the 1992 case. It was Crum's arrest in this case, authorities said, that made him a person of interest, reinvigorating an investigation in Jennifer's case. Sheriff Alnienwis said, when Crum was implicated in the 1992 case, he quickly, almost instantaneously became our #1 suspect in Jennifer's case because of the similarities. He also noted that over the years there were suspects, but Crum was not on that list, so he came out of left field in 2015. In 2018, on the 25th anniversary of her daughter's demise, Jennifer's mother told the Times that she and other family members tried to have faith that her case would eventually be solved. I think the investigators would have done anything in the world to have solved this case. In 2019, Crum was sentenced to life in prison for the crime he committed in 1992, leaving his victim partly paralyzed. The victim's aunt spoke in court during the sentencing hearing, recounting the lifelong damage he had inflicted. Her aunt said her life stopped that day. She also mentioned Jennifer. A year later, a young lady, Jennifer Odom, was slayed, she said, and that brought back so much different things that today the perpetrator still has not been caught. The arrest and sentence of Crum gave Detective Lloydgren a new resolve and Jennifer's family new hope that the person responsible will be caught. Detectives then began an intensive investigation and interviewed everyone they could find for the next several years they may have been associated with Crum around the time Jennifer was kidnapped. This information was turned over to the state attorney, and the facts and circumstances were turned over to a grand jury. On July 27, 2023, a month shy of what would have been Jennifer's 43rd birthday, officials announced that they had finally made an arrest in the case and that prosecutors would seek capital punishment against the accused. State Attorney Bill Glass made the announcement during a press conference. This was just after the Hernando County Sheriff's Office announced that it has charged the 61-year-old Jeffrey Norman Crum with the kidnapping, assault, and slaying of Jennifer 30 years before. Glass also said, I have confidence that we have the right person and we have the right aggravators in this particular case to treat it as a capital punishment case. This is every parent's nightmare. This is the thing that keeps parents up at night worried about their children. Detective George Lloydgren, who had spent years investigating Jennifer's case, said, shock is probably the best word to describe the reaction of Jennifer's family when he told them about the arrest. He said he did it quickly because I did not want to get emotional. It is a lot for them to take in and absorb, and I can imagine it is going to take some time before it really sinks in. According to Sheriff Neenhuis, every viable lead for the past 30 years, including those that came from the Pasco County Sheriff's Office or the Florida Department of Law Enforcement or private citizens, were investigated thoroughly. He added, the investigation never stopped. Hundreds of items were tested and retested every time new technology came out in the hope of finding a smoking gun to solve this case. The sheriff added, literally countless detectives and sworn law enforcement personnel and civilian and tipsters have had a hand in this investigation. The minute Crumb was identified as a suspect in the case, Detective Lundgren went to work putting a mosaic together, or a puzzle, and I can tell you, other than the conviction in a previous case, there was no other piece of the puzzle. That was a big piece of the puzzle. Every other piece of the puzzle that got us to this point were tiny little fragments that gave the state attorney and the grand jury enough confidence to indict Crumb. Sheriff Nienhuis also said that they are searching for additional victims. Authorities fear Crumb may be responsible for other crimes. A picture of him from 1993 was released, asking that anyone who recognized him from the 1980s and 1990s to contact Sheriff Nienhuis. We urge anyone who had interactions with this individual, has information on other crimes he may have committed, and or may have themselves been a victim of Jeffrey Crumb, to reach out to the Hernando County Sheriff's Office and speak to our cold case unit. Despite keeping a lot of information close to the vest, authorities did say that in 1992, Crumb worked in construction as a drywall installer and lived on Somerset Lane in Spring Hill, the Pasco County area where Jennifer was abducted from. His residence was about 21 miles from the place where Jennifer was last seen and 12 miles from where her body was found. Officials also say at that time he drove a blue truck. During Thursday, July 27, 2023's press conference, Sheriff Nienhuis kept reiterating Crumb was not on the investigators' radar until the past few years. Records showed Crumb has a significant history of convictions for violent crime. The sheriff said Crumb had been arrested in the early 1980s for armed robbery in Hillsborough County. In 1985, he was charged with kidnapping, assault, and false imprisonment in Hillsborough County. He was arrested by Tampa police in 1987 for carrying a concealed weapon. In 1988, he was caught again carrying a concealed weapon and was charged with aggravated assault. In 1998, he was arrested for domestic violence in Hernando County 3 times. In 2001, he was arrested for violation of probation in Hillsborough County. He was arrested a few years later for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in Hernando County. In 2015, he was arrested in Pasco County for aggravated assault on a child under the age of 12. Sheriff Nienhuis stated he is a bad individual who enjoyed violence. Crumb is already serving 2 life sentences for the assault and kidnapping case out of Pasco County. That was prosecuted around 2015. He is currently in the Hernando County Jail. Judge Kurt E. Hitzman ordered him to be held without bond and appointed a public defender to represent him. Communities in Pasco and Hernando counties were on edge after Jennifer Odom's kidnapping and slaying back then. They shared their thoughts and feelings after the news of the arrest was announced. Jeannie Cameron, the general manager at Papa Joe's Italian restaurant in Brooksville, said she and others in the community remember hearing about her disappearance all too well. So we all remember hearing about her disappearance, Jennifer's, and about the blue truck, and everybody was on alert about looking. I think the bottom line was finding out who did it and getting him off the streets so that another family doesn't have to be tormented. Because I really feel like the whole community was tormented until they found out the answer. Joseph Giortana, the owner of Papa Joe's Italian restaurant, said, "Back then, 30 years ago as a parent, I was very angry that someone could do something like that to a child, and then leave her there in the middle of nowhere." Jessica Ellis said she went to Whiteman Middle School with Jennifer and played in the same clarinet section in band class. "I would say we saw each other a lot. We weren't like close friends, but we knew a lot of the same people. We rode the school bus every day, and I just remember her always being nice with me and everyone else that rode her school bus that knew her. You know, a lot of us are parents ourselves now. The fact that anyone would do this to a child, it makes me hold my 5-year-old a lot tighter now." Grief and fear followed in the days, months, and years after Jennifer lost her life. Crumb is closure for many in the community. Candace Lane Rogers, a 9-year-old girl attending Holmes Elementary School, lived with her mother in Spokane, Washington. On March 6, 1959, Candace was out selling mints for her campfire Girl Scout troop in the neighborhood when she suddenly disappeared. Later that evening, after Candace failed to return home, her mother reported her missing. A massive search was launched with police officers, volunteers, and family members all scouring the neighborhood and surrounding areas in hopes of finding her. Helicopters were also called in to search from above, and sadly, during the search, one of the helicopters crashed, resulting in 3 casualties. 12 hours later, a police officer found 6 boxes of mints scattered near a bridge. However, there was no sign of Candace. Police would receive more than 750 tips in the following days, but none of them panned out. Her case was covered in the media, and her mother appealed to anyone who could help them provide any information into her disappearance, but to no avail. Then 16 days later, 2 hunters found Candace's shoes while hunting groundhogs in the remote woods. They notified police, and soon a search of the area found the body of Candace. She was found 12 miles away from her home. She had been buried under a pile of pine needles and brush. Her legs had been tied together at the ankles with parts of her own slip. An autopsy revealed that she had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death with a piece of her own slip. Over the years, several people confessed to the murder of the child, but none of the confessions were credible. Alfred Graves and James Howard Barnett were considered suspects, but they committed suicide shortly after. The only prime suspect was Hubian Morse. Morse was a convicted serial killer and had murdered 2 Spokane women in a killing spree between 1959 and 1961. In 1955, he was charged for attempted molestation of 28-year-old girls while they were selling Girl Scout cookies in Fairfield, California. He was admitted to a Atascadero State Mental Hospital for therapy and released as cured in January of 1957. Morse submitting to killing 3 women, but denied that he had anything to do with Candace's murder. In 2001, investigators were able to retrieve an unknown male's DNA from Candace's clothing. A DNA test ruled Morse out as a suspect. Police interviewed multiple suspects over the last 6 decades, but none were ever charged. In 2020, the investigators reached out to a Texas-based company, Orem Labs, who were able to build a DNA profile. The DNA profile was entered into genealogy databases, and investigators found 3 possible suspects. The suspects were all brothers but were already dead. Police learned that only one of the brothers, John Ray Hoff, had had children. The police then contacted Hoff's daughter, who agreed to provide a DNA sample. A DNA test revealed that it was 2,900,000 times more likely that Hoff's daughter was a genealogical match to the DNA sample found at the crime scene. Police then exhumed Hoff's body, and a DNA test subsequently identified John Ray Hoff as the killer. John Ray Hoff was 20 years old in 1959 and was never a suspect in Candace's murder. Hoff was a troubled teenager, and at the age of 16 he ran away from a state boys training camp near Olympia. Authorities captured Hoff and 3 other boys near Yakima. His troubles would continue even after he was married and had children. In 1970, Hoff committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. In an eerie coincidence, police learned that Candace and Hoff were both buried in the same cemetery. It was also discovered by investigators that Hoff's stepsister was Candace's big sister in her Girl Scout campfire group. Hoff's wife and daughter later took Hoff's body from the cemetery to give Candace's family some privacy. After 62 years, the case was finally solved, though it brought little peace to anyone involved. Moving on to the next case. Silas Jane. On July 2, 1966, the peaceful atmosphere of Indiana Dunes State Park turned tragic when 3 young women disappeared in broad daylight while relaxing on the beach. What was meant to be a joyful celebration of Independence Day quickly turned into a massive manhunt. The women, Renee Brull, maiden name Slanico, 19, a tall figure at 5 feet 9 inches, with brown hair and hazel eyes, along with her 2 companions, were last seen lounging in the serene surroundings of the park, which was famed for its stunning beaches, dunes, and natural beauty. But their day of relaxation would be abruptly interrupted by an unknown force, and the 3 women vanished without a trace. The location, once a serene and popular spot for both locals and tourists to enjoy the lake and lush surroundings, soon became a crime scene. The women's disappearance on the 4th of July weekend was met with confusion and fear, as a community already reveling in the holiday now faced the dark mystery. This case remains unsolved, leaving many unanswered questions about what happened to the three women and why they were targeted. She was last seen wearing a ruffled yellow bathing suit. And Miller, 21, was 5 feet 2 inches with brown hair and blue eyes. She was last seen wearing a two-piece bathing suit with a red belt. Patricia Blau, 19, was 5 feet 4 inches with brown hair and brown eyes. Last seen in her bathing suit, which was brown with green flowers and golden leaves. These three close friends made the 60-mile drive together from their respective homes in the Chicago area and arrived at the lake around 10 a.m. and parked their car, a Buick owned by a Miller, in the lot about 100 yards from where they would set up their towel. While it was the start of a busy weekend, with the park service estimating 9,000 people in attendance that day, the girls did not go completely unnoticed. A couple noticed them at noon that same day leave their things, including a transistor radio and a jar of tanning lotion on their beach blanket, and enter the waters of the lake. Soon after entering the lake, the couple witnessed the three ladies speaking with a man who was on a 14 to 16-foot boat. Soon after they began speaking to him, they boarded his boat, which had an outboard motor and blue interior, and reportedly they headed west. The couple thought nothing of this series of actions until around dusk that same day, when they noticed all the girls' belongings still laying on the beach where they had been left many hours before. This drew the couple's suspicions, as it seemed the girls had abandoned their valuables, which park rangers would later learn included cash and their car keys, and left them vulnerable to theft. The couple was so stricken by the strange behavior of the girls, having left their belongings on the beach as night fell, that they alerted a park ranger. The park ranger collected the girls, including their cigarettes, car keys, and wallets with money still in them, and stowed them safely away at the park superintendent's office, where they sat until the investigation into the girls' disappearances officially began. It was Renee's father who first raised the alarm of the missing woman, when by July 4th, 2 days later, he hadn't heard from them. Renee had specifically planned on being back before the evening of July 2nd, as she stated that she had intended to cook dinner for her husband. After families of the three women filed missing person reports, park rangers went searching for the car that they arrived in and found it still sitting in the same parking space in the parking lot. Once an official search started on July 5th, more witnesses came forward, having recalled seeing the girls boarding a boat. One beach tour offered his camera footage from the day, and based on those reels, police were able to pinpoint 2 boats that they believed could be involved. One was a 16 to 18-foot boat captained by a single man, fitting the witness description of the man the women were seen speaking with, tan with dark hair. The other was a larger boat, 26 to 28 feet, being operated by 3 men. Both boats showed in the camera's footage had 3 female passengers on them, matching the features of the ladies. So both were considered possibilities. In fact, authorities believe that both images, taken almost 3 hours apart, could be of the women, as some witnesses say the smaller boat dropped the girls off on shore, where they may have been seen eating and walking in the sand, before being approached by a separate unknown male. After talking to this separate man, all 4 were picked up by the other larger boat, a cabin cruiser, this time with 2 other men on it. Many believed it was strange that Renee's husband of 15 months didn't call in a missing persons report sooner. Rumors circulated after a note was found in Renee's purse from that day, addressed to her husband. The note complained that the husband had his priorities misaligned and that he spent too much time fixing hot rod cars with friends and not enough time on their marriage. Friends and family of the couple, though, say there were no major marriage problems and that Renee probably wrote that note when she was feeling angry in order to vent, and the fact that it was still in her purse confirms she never gave it to her husband. Renee was the only married woman of the group, but not the only one with personal problems. And Miller had told friends a few days prior that she was 3 months pregnant. She discussed her plans to enter a house for unwed mothers. She had been having an affair with a married man and, therefore, could not be with him. It is also rumored that Patricia, the third friend, was also pregnant, also by a married man. Based on these pregnancy rumors, there is a theory that the women were actually scheduled to have illegal abortions that day. One fact that substantiates this rumor is the sighting of Ralph Largo Jr., whose physical traits match the description of the man on the boat. He confirmed he was at the beach that day. Largo's aunt, with whom he lived, was in the business of performing illegal abortions for women in need. Did the woman board the boat in order to get the procedure done secretly, as it was illegal at the time in that state? Some wonder if the procedure went awry and caused the death of the girls, which needed to be covered up. But then what happened to Renee? Was she pregnant too? That would be a huge coincidence. Or did she witness the deaths and need to be quieted as well? Ralph Largo Jr. died in 2009, so he can provide no answers. Another theory is that the boat they were on encountered trouble and crashed. Some debris from an apparent boating accident were found near Bailey Generating Station of Northern Indiana Public Service Company on Lake Michigan a few days after July 2nd. However, the families of the three girls say that accidental drowning was not likely, as all three girls were experienced swimmers. In fact, Patricia was known to be able to swim 20 miles in one day with and having similar skills. There's another angle to this case, the so-called horse syndicate connection. This theory involves the three ladies' common love, riding and caring for horses. All three ladies frequented the Tricolor stables in Palatine, Illinois, and knew George Jane, who was a well-known and wealthy horse dealer. George Jane had a bitter feud over horse finances with his brother, Silas Jane, a notorious leader of the so-called horse syndicate, an underground club of some sort that dealt with the buying, selling, and betting of racehorses. The brothers' frequent and intense fighting had actually resulted in the death of a young woman months prior. Cheryl Enrod, a successful equestrian, was asked by George to move his Cadillac for him, but in carrying out this task for him, she got into a car that was rigged with explosives. The car bomb was triggered by the engine starting and Cheryl was killed instantly. The bomb was thought to be placed by an associate of Silas's and meant for George as retaliation for some horse-related feud they had been having. Court documents show that the prosecution believed an arsonist was paid $10,000 to place the bomb that killed Cheryl, and the arsonist was subsequently sentenced to life in prison almost 30 years after the actual crime. George was so fearful of a subsequent car bomb attack that he rigged a tool that could turn on a car's ignition without physically getting in the vehicle. It is theorized that the three missing women may have witnessed the planting of this bomb or some other nefarious act, and that their deaths were related to the incident. The girls also rode at Silas' stable, even though they boarded their horses at George's stable. For months prior, when Renee came home with a facial injury, she cryptically blamed the laceration on issues with the syndicate people. Additionally, the phone numbers of both George and Silas Shane were found among the girls' abandoned possessions. Eliminating witnesses would not be out of character for Silas Jane, who was known to be cold-blooded, cunning, and brutal. The owner of a rival horse training business, Idle Hour Stable, he had a reputation for taking advantage of the young women of rich Chicago parents who desired to learn to ride and had no shame in mixing his criminal activities with his stable. Silas is connected to numerous felonies, including the rape of a young woman while he was a teenager, conspiracy to kill his brother George, covering up his employee's murder of 3 young boys, known as the Peterson-Schulitzer murders, and a shootout with police that resulted in the death of an officer. Silas is also connected to the death of an older woman, Helen Brock, who spent over $250,000 on horses and may have gotten caught up with Silas's horse gang, known sometimes as the Horse Syndicate and other times as the Jane Gang. Silas was said to be a sociopath with early childhood proclivities for murder. At the young age of 8, he was bitten by a goose on his family farm and was so enraged that he killed each and every goose on the property. At least 11 horse deaths are also connected to him, and he seemed to take his anger at his brother out on his brother's prized horses, including the burning of 10 of them alive in George's barn. He also injected 1 prize-winning mare with turpentine. Given the long list of deaths that followed his career, it is not hard to imagine him being involved with the missing women. George, his brother, was shot to death while at his son's birthday party. The mysterious disappearance of the 3 women at Indiana Dunes State Park in 1966 remains one of the state's most haunting unsolved cases. In a bizarre twist, Silas, a man with a known criminal background, allegedly told the sheriff before his death in 1987 that he had buried 3 bodies under his stable. However, before any investigation could be launched, the sheriff tragically died in a farming accident, and no one ever followed up on this chilling statement. Further complicating the case, Silas owned a boat that matched the descriptions of when the women were reportedly seen boarding, raising suspicions about his possible involvement. Despite his dark past, there is no solid evidence directly linking him to the women's disappearance. With no bodies found and the absence of concrete clues, the case remains frustratingly unresolved. Though it remains open, the investigation is inactive and the families of the missing women continue to hope that new evidence will emerge to finally provide answers. Until then, the case lingers as a haunting reminder of the unknown fate of the 3 young women. Moving on to the next case. Helen Brzezinski, a 20-year-old woman from Massachusetts, was studying at Wheaton College in her home state. In January 1980, she moved to Colorado to work as an intern at a Denver radio station, embarking on the beginning of her adult life. Helen was living with a friend at her aunt's house in Englewood, Colorado. On January 16, 1980, Helen went to work. After work, she took the bus like usual. She was not seen again after leaving the bus station. Helen's aunt got worried when she did not arrive home and reported her missing. It did not take long for police to find her. Her body was found the next day in a field. She had been stabbed, investigators believed, as she was abducted right after she left the bus station. DNA from a male was found at a crime scene. Unfortunately, in 1980, DNA technology was not very advanced and they could not identify the man. They did, however, store the DNA so they can one day use it again when DNA technology has advanced. Helen did not know a lot of people in the area since she only lived there for 2 weeks and did not have any known enemies. Investigators did not receive a lot of leads and the case went cold. In 1998, the DNA were uploaded to her database after a DNA profile could be created, but it did not match to anyone. In 2017, her case was reopened and investigators tried again to solve her case. They uploaded the DNA to jetmatch.com and phoned a couple of potential family members of the suspect. One of the family members they came across was Rob Deal. Rob was very eager to help. He explained his entire family tree as best he could and gave them a sample of his DNA. The investigators then used the help of C.C. Moore and Parabon Nanolabs to find a family member who would give them an exact match. In December 2019, they really narrowed it down to James Curtis Glanton. He was a very distant cousin of Rob. James was a truck driver living in Lake Butler, Florida. Investigators saw that he had a criminal history and found that he was on parole for an assault in Arkansas after serving 4 years in prison in 1980. He was released to live in a Denver home of a former counselor who offered to help him. This meant that he was in the area when Helen's life was taken, and that he had a violent history. Investigators followed James for a few weeks. They retrieved a beer mug that he was drinking from at a bar. The DNA was tested and it was an exact match. Early in 2020, James was arrested. We're now also looking into other possible crimes he could be responsible for. Helen's sister, Janet Johnson, is now the only living close relative of Helen. At 70 years old, Janet was overjoyed to hear news about the case and expressed her deep love for her sister. "I want people to know what a special person Helen was. She was my best friend and she had a bright future ahead of her," Janet shared. Moving on to the next case. Kelly and Workman was a 24-year-old woman living with her parents in Douglas County, Missouri. Described as quiet, independent, and determined, Kelly was the daughter of dairy farmers and was always willing to help with farm tasks. To supplement her income, she offered lawn care and maintenance services, often working on yards and properties in the Dogwood area. On June 30, 1989, Kelly was mowing the grass at Dogwood Cemetery, located next to Pleasant Southern Baptist Church. Known for her attention to detail, she carefully mowed around the rows of headstones and used trimmers to cut stray blades of grass around each marker. This was a routine task for Kelly, but it would tragically mark the last day she was seen alive. She began her work at 3:30 p.m. and at around 5 p.m., it started raining. So, Kelly went home to feed the calves while her parents milked the cows at their rented Seymour farm. When the rain stopped at 5:40, Kelly was back at the cemetery. Her uncle saw her mowing as he drove past the lot on Missouri 14 in Douglas County. This was the last time Kelly was ever seen alive. 20 minutes later, With less than half of the job completed, it appears that Kelly left the mower beside a tombstone and disappeared from the cemetery. When she failed to return home for dinner later that night, her parents became worried and reported her missing to the police. However, police told her parents to wait as they suggested Kelly might have run away. Her parents vehemently disagreed as Kelly was dependable and would not have left her work unfinished, nor would she have left her tools simply sitting out in the cemetery. Her parents and friends organized their own searches and soon, despite suggesting that Kelly had run away, the police launched their own countywide search in and around Douglas. Kelly's 1986 Oldsmobile was soon found in the church connected to the cemetery's parking lot with its key in the ignition. For several days, the search involved hundreds of volunteers as well as sent tracking dogs and helicopters, which scoured the countryside. However, nothing would be found. Then 7 days later, on July 7th, a farmer and his son in nearby Christian County stumbled upon Kelly's remains submerged in water from the waist down. Her body was found about 10 miles from where she disappeared. She was found fully clothed, but so badly decomposed that it took dental records to identify her. How she died remains murky. Her death certificate merely lists, quote, homicidal violence. Authorities believe that Kelly was abducted from the cemetery with the motive of sexual assault. However, at the time, the autopsy stated she was not sexually assaulted. It was only more recently that investigators confirmed Kelly was indeed sexually assaulted. They say she probably died in the early hours of July 1st. However, due to the advanced state of decomposition, they could neither determine the time nor the cause of death. Kelly's mother, Joan Workman, believes she knows the exact moment Kelly died. She said that after reporting her daughter missing on July 1st at 3:30 a.m., as she sat on the living room couch and worried about Kelly with family and friends, she felt a surge of panic and pain in her chest. She says that she thought to herself, "Hang on, Kelly, hang on." But then she says the feeling passed, leaving her, as she described, feeling dead inside. Kelly's body was interred at the Dogwood Cemetery, which she so lovingly helped maintain. Kelly's parents harbored frustration towards the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, feeling that had the police treated the case with the gravity it deserved from the onset, there might have been a chance to save Kelly. Their anger stemmed partially from the police's failure to dust Kelly's 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass for fingerprints. Moreover, they expressed disappointment that crucial pieces of information, such as reports of a screaming woman, were overlooked amid the chaos of the initial night. A few months later, Kelly's mother learned that 4 days after Kelly's abduction, an anonymous caller reached out to her home, leaving a message with another family member regarding a sighting of someone at the Workman residence on the afternoon of the abduction. Surprisingly, the caller did not reach out to any law enforcement agencies involved, and Joan believes that her daughter might have known her abductor or abductors. A reward of $10,000 was offered. Police questioned several suspects over the years, but no one was ever charged. There were 2 suspects who were repeatedly questioned in Kelly's murder: Dwight and Bobby Banks. Dwight and Bobby Banks were 2 brothers who had been pulled over by a Missouri Highway Patrol officer in 1990 as they were traveling down the highway in a pickup truck on the night of Kelly's disappearance. It is unclear why they were initially suspected in Kelly's murder, but Dwight Banks was asked by police to take a polygraph test regarding the murder, and he agreed to take it. He reportedly passed the test. A few years later, Dwight, alongside his brother Bobby, again became suspects after Dwight reportedly confessed to several people that he murdered Kelly. In a 1995 article from the Springfield News Leader, it was reported that Dwight had confessed multiple times to killing Kelly. However, he later asserted that these confessions were made in jest, attributing them to him being under the influence of alcohol at the time. Dwight admitted that he and Bobby saw Kelly just a few hours before she was abducted when she had been working, but he said he did not kill her. Dwight Banks added that his brother Bobby is also innocent. At the time of Kelly's disappearance, Dwight Banks told the news leader that he and Bobby were at his house eating fried chicken. However, the newspaper, the News Leader, also reported that authorities have been told that Dwight Banks may have taken drugs before the 1990 polygraph examination, which he had passed. Later, Dwight's brother Bobby asked an ex-girlfriend of his to provide an alibi for him for the evening Kelly went missing, which she later reported to police. It was reported that Bobby Banks failed polygraph tests, which Dwight Banks attributed to his brother's frail emotions. 9 years later, the Missouri Highway Patrol Crime Lab issued a warrant for 2 men, one of which was Dwight seeking DNA evidence allegedly connecting him to the killing. However, the tests did not yield any conclusive findings. On February 20th, 2024, authorities said at a news conference that 3 men had been arrested and indicted on charges of first-degree murder, along with charges of forcible rape and first-degree kidnapping. The 3 men were identified as Wiley Belt and the initial suspects, brothers Dwight Banks and Bobby Banks. The case took a major turn when an eyewitness from the community bravely came forward, providing critical evidence that enabled investigators to present the case to a grand jury. This led to the arrest of 3 men, all in their mid-60s at the time. The suspects, identified as the Banks brothers and a man named Belt, are currently being held at the Douglas County Jail in Ava. Each of them faces a $250,000 cash bond while awaiting further legal proceedings. The community's involvement played a crucial role in bringing the case closer to justice. Moving on to the next case. Akia Edelstein. At just 22 years old, Akia Edelstein was a devoted mother living in Baltimore, Maryland, in 2017. She had a young daughter and was expecting another child with 36-year-old Michael Robertson. On May 7, 2017, concerns swept through her family when Akia failed to appear at her own baby shower. It was soon uncovered that she had last been seen alive on May 3, 2017, 24 days before her family reported her missing. Investigators decided to create a timeline of events leading up to her disappearance, and also took a closer look at her unborn baby's father, Michael Robertson. Akia and Robertson first met in the 1990s when his grandmother babysat her as a child. They reconnected in 2016 and began dating. At the same time, Robertson was in a relationship with a 22-year-old woman. That woman had recently given birth to the couple's second child. Investigators learned that Achiel was under the impression that she was going to move in with Robertson and was excited about it. Robertson sent her pictures of an apartment interior on May 2, 2017. About 1:24 p.m. that day, Akia purchased 2 money orders totaling $450 after making several ATM withdrawals from her savings account. Moments later, Akia messaged Robertson on Facebook. "I called you. I got the money order." That afternoon, Akia unsuccessfully attempted to withdraw cash twice from an ATM at a Wells Fargo location downtown. Akia and Robertson were texting back and forth on May 3rd. That day, Akia was seen on surveillance video depositing the 2 money orders and a paycheck from her employer at a BB&T location in the Central Business District. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. Then she withdrew $450. Akia told a bank employee, whom she knew from high school, that she had to cash the orders because the property manager only takes cash. It is believed she was referring to the property that Robinson told her they are moving into. At about 4 p.m., Robertson took a Lyft order by Akia to the Cherry Hill neighborhood. Phone records indicate Robertson was in the area near Akia's residence from 5:35 p.m. to 6:18 p.m. At about 5:22 p.m., Akia sent a friend an invite to her baby shower on the following Sunday. It was her last known communication. Phone records show a telemarketer tried to call Akia at 6:57 p.m. At that time, both her phone and Robertson's phone were located downtown. Akia's phone activity ends there, indicating that the device was turned off or disabled. Using a reverse image search, investigators determined the apartment picture Robertson had sent the day before was a completely different residence from the one he had named. Investigators learned of a volatile argument between Robertson and the mother of his children the night before Akia disappeared. When investigators looked at what could have sparked the argument, they saw that evening Akia shared a sonogram picture on Facebook. On the day of Akia's shower, family members said that they found her apartment nearly clean out. Police first thought that this was a clue that she walked off on her own. That was before they learned that Robertson made Akia believe that they were going to move in together. Robertson was interviewed several times during the investigation, but notably has displayed a consistent pattern of hiding or avoiding police contact for weeks or months at a time between interviews. During an interview on June 15, 2017, he claimed he saw Akia on Monday, May 1st. But we know that this is false because of the phone records. In July of 2017, a police spokesman said that investigators no longer believe that she walked off on her own and had come to believe that there was foul play. After years of collecting all the telephone records, financial records, social media messages, and conducting multiple interviews, investigators had enough evidence to arrest Michael Robertson in connection to Akia's disappearance. Authorities arrested Robertson and charged him with taking Akia's life on February 1, 2022. 2 days later, on February 3rd, Baltimore State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby held a press conference to announce the arrest of Robertson. Mosby said, "Give a special thanks to the family of Akia Eggleston for never giving up in their pursuit of justice for Akia and her unborn child." The state's attorney office released the full statement of probable cause in Akia's case. It reads as follows: based on her pattern of life, the time passed, extensive publicity, and multiple searches and monetary rewards for information in this case, the document stated the fact that Akia has not returned to her family or been electronically or physically located overwhelmingly indicates that she is in fact deceased. The document details Akia's last days as revealed by interviews, financial records, telephone records, and social media communications, and alleges that the investigation revealed the only person with the motive, means, an opportunity to take Akia's life was the purported father of her unborn child, Michael Robertson. While Akia's body has not been found, the statement of probable cause revealed that in October of 2017, following the airing of a local television news report on Akia's case, Robertson's Google searches for "where does Baltimore City trash go when picked up," Baltimore City dumpster pickup, and Baltimore City landfill indicate what may have happened to her remains. Michael Robertson is being held on bond in Michigan, where he currently resides. In its press release, the Baltimore State's Attorney's Office stated that Robertson faces a maximum penalty of 2 life sentences in prison if found guilty of all charges. Supervisor Special Agent Shane Butchwald with the FBI of Baltimore also spoke. "For nearly 5 years, the people of Baltimore have searched, hoped, and mourned with Akia's family and friends," she said. "But they never gave up, and neither did we." Buchenwald added that while Akia's body still hasn't been found, "We hope this arrest brings a level of comfort and closure to Akia's family." Members of Akia's family also addressed the media. "Thank you to everyone for their thoughts and their prayers," Akia's aunt, Synovia Wilson, said, "for keeping hope for our family that we would find her alive, even though the evidence says something different, that she's not. We just want to say thank you and just to please continue to keep us in your prayers." Akia's stepfather, Sean Wilkinson, took to the podium to thank the investigation agencies who worked on Akia's case. He also brought attention to an issue that is all too common. "Domestic violence is real, and when it happens, we need to address it," said Wilkinson. The family remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice for Akia. Her case has profoundly impacted their lives and relationships, but they stand united, vowing to persist until the final judgment is rendered.